The essence replenishment pill can help you recover some of your energy, but if you want to fully recover, you'll have to rest some more. Before that, tell me how you fell victim to a blood curse insect. Those things are extremely rare on our Tian Yuan continent, Han Li said with an intrigued expression. Seeing as you're aware of the existence of blood curse insects, I'm sure you're also aware that they're not found on our Tian Yuan continent. I fell prey to this blood curse insect on the blood sky continent, and if it weren't for the special nature of my body, I most likely wouldn't have been able to return alive to our Su family, the blood soul sighed. So you really did go to the blood sky continent. According to fellow Taoist Su Jiao, didn't you intend to go to the thunder continent? Why have you gone to the blood sky continent instead? Han Li asked. I did indeed go to the Thunder continent first, but after recovering a part of my memories, I discovered that I had to pay the Blood Sky continent a visit as well, and that was something I didn't foresee, the Blood Soul replied with a wry smile. I see. According to my knowledge, blood curse insects are extremely rare even on the Blood Sky continent, and not just any cultivator can come into possession of them. It looks like you must have run into quite a bit of trouble on the Blood Sky continent, Han Li said with a meaningful expression. That's an understatement. I've made myself several powerful enemies on the Blood Sky continent, and if I were to return to the continent on my own, there's a very good chance that it'll be my final resting place, the Blood Soul sighed. Oh, it sounds like you plan to go back to the Blood Sky continent again, Han Li remarked as his brows furrowed slightly. Unfortunately, that is a trip that I must make. My newfound memories tell me that Ice Soul vanished on the Blood Sky continent, and I've already gathered some leads, but if I want to find my true body, then another trip to the Blood Sky continent will be nothing short of mandatory, the Blood Soul said in a resigned manner. So fellow Taoist Ice Soul disappeared on the Blood Sky continent. It's no wonder that the Su family was unable to track down any leads. Having said that, this still doesn't explain why you decided to offer the Heaven Void Cauldron to me, Han Li said with an inquisitive expression. A peculiar look flashed through the Blood Soul's eyes upon hearing this, and she suddenly turned to the other members of the Su family present before instructing, "You can all go now. I have something very important to discuss in private with Senior Han, and I'll call for you if I need anything." Su Jiao and the others didn't dare to oppose her wishes, and he replied, "Yes, Senior, we'll be waiting outside." "Senior Han, may I ask these fellow Taoists to give us some privacy as well?" the Blood Soul asked as she cast a hesitant gaze toward Silvermoon and the others. It looks like fellow Taoist Blood Soul really does have something very important to discuss with me, so I'll have to ask you to leave for now as well, Silvermoon, Han Li instructed in a calm manner. Silvermoon and the others naturally had no objections to this, and they also departed along with the expressionless Taoist Zai. Thus, Han Li and the Blood Soul were the only two people left in the room. "All right, you can go ahead and tell me what you want to say now," Han Li prompted with a hint of a smile on his face. "Forgive me, Senior Han, but what I'm about to tell you next concerns very sensitive information. Would you like to know the true purpose of the Heaven Void Cauldron? I'm planning to use it to make an exchange with you, Senior Han," the Blood Soul said with a serious expression. An exchange? A hint of intrigue appeared on Han Li's face upon hearing this. "That's right, I can assure you that learning this secret will benefit you immensely, Senior Han," the Blood Soul said. "If this secret really is as useful as you proclaim, then I certainly wouldn't be opposed to an exchange, but you'll have to convince me first, fellow Taoist Blood Soul," Han Li replied. "I knew you'd be interested in this, Senior Han. Regarding the true origins of the Heaven Void Cauldron, I'll have to go back to an opportunity I encountered in the human world. The cauldron is actually a treasure that I created while trying to replicate a treasure recorded on a page of the Golden Jade tome, and its true purpose is not for battle. Instead, it's to be used as a key." Thus the Blood Soul began her story, and initially Han Li listened with a faint smile, but his expression then gradually became more serious, and at the end, even a hint of astonishment had crept into his eyes. Round half a day later, Han Li departed from the Su family and traveled toward the center of the human territory on a giant white ark. "You spoke with fellow Taoist Blood Soul for quite a long time, Brother Han. What did she discuss with you?" Silvermoon asked. "Not much, we simply made an agreement," Han Li replied with a smile. "An agreement?" A contemplative look appeared in Silvermoon's eyes. "You can call it an exchange as well," Han Li added in a nonchalant manner. Silvermoon merely smiled and didn't raise any further questions. Li Rong was also very intrigued, but she knew that she couldn't compare with Silvermoon, so she made the wise decision to remain silent. In contrast, Zhu didn't think much of the matter and asked, "Senior Han, where are we going next?" "We'll be going to the Holy Island next. Fellow Taoist Li, I'll be counting on you to lead the way," Han Li said. "Rest assured, Senior. I'll be sure to get us to the Holy Island as soon as possible," Li Rong hurriedly said in an elated manner. Han Li nodded in response, and all of a sudden, the giant arc they were situated on accelerated by about twofold, almost instantly vanishing into the distance as a long streak of light. 2 months later, in an extremely secluded mountain range on the border of the human and demon territories, there was a vast sea of mist that stretched as far as the eyes could see, and encompassed close to a third of the entire mountain range. However, once one traveled close to 10,000 kilometers into the sea of mist, they would discover an island hovering several thousand feet in the air with hundreds of massive meteorite-like rocks slowly orbiting around it. Each giant rock was several acres in size, and there was a series of buildings situated on each rock alongside groups of armored warriors. There were also some flying boats and carriages that occasionally entered and exited the giant island, patrolling the surrounding area. A series of light barriers could be seen in the air around the island, spreading over virtually the entire sky. This was none other than the revered Holy Island, and its defenses were truly quite formidable. Within a hall at the center of the island, there were around a dozen body integration stage elders in attires of different colors seated on 2 rows of chairs, and all of them wore anxious and uneasy expressions. "Fairy Li should be here soon, right?" a clean-shaven man asked. "Don't be so agitated, fellow Taoist Zun. Fairy Rong has informed us in advance that she would arrive today, so she's definitely coming," an elderly man replied. "I'm naturally aware of that, but it's already past noon now. I'm just concerned that they may have had an accident," the clean-shaven man sighed. "Hee, what could possibly go wrong with Senior Han accompanying them?" a woman in a white coat chuckled. Indeed, the powers displayed by Senior Han during his ceremony most likely place him above even Senior Mo and Senior Ao Zio in terms of power. "If it weren't for that, we wouldn't have waited here for him for so long," the elderly man said with a wry smile. "Having said that, rumors are still just rumors. None of us have ever seen Senior Han in action in person. If he really is powerful enough to severely wound the Black Owl monarch of the Xianxia race with ease, then that would be quite extraordinary," the clean-shaven man said with a hesitant expression. "Even if the rumors are slightly exaggerated, it's definitely true that Senior Han is far more powerful than the average new Grand Ascension stage being. On top of that, both Senior Mo and Senior Ao Zio have disappeared in the Elder Devil realm, and Senior Han is the only one we can count on to save them. Regardless of how we look at it, it's imperative for us to assist Senior Han with all our power," the elderly man said without any hesitation. "That is indeed true, but we've already severely offended him by trying to take his disciple. Senior Han isn't going to exact revenge on our Holy Island, is he?" The clean-shaven man sighed with a wry smile. Several of the other elders' expressions changed slightly upon hearing this. "Rest assured, Senior Han was able to progress to the Grand Ascension stage, so he's definitely not a petty individual. On top of that, we were only doing what was best for our 2 races, so I'm sure Senior Han wouldn't blame us for that," the elderly man said in a nonchalant manner. The other elders' expressions eased slightly upon hearing this. Just as the elderly man was about to say something else, a pleasant voice suddenly rang out from outside. "Looks like everyone's all here. In that case, I won't have to inform all of you of my arrival one by one." As soon as this voice trailed off, 3 women strode into the hall. They were none other than Li Rong, Silvermoon, and Zhu, and Li Rong was the one who had just spoken. However, Han Li and Taoist Zai were nowhere to be seen. "Ah, Fairy Li, fellow Taoist Ling Long, has Senior Han already arrived?" the elderly man immediately asked as he rose to his feet. "Senior Han has indeed already arrived at our Holy Island, but he's gone somewhere else first. Rest assured, he'll be joining us soon," Li Rong replied with a smile. Chapter 22:13, Heavenly Tome Library. Meanwhile, at the foot of a tall cliff at the center of the Holy Island, Han Li was staring intently at a massive crystalline wall that was around 1,000 feet tall. Taoist Zai was standing beside him, and he was also appraising the giant wall. Around 80 feet away from the 2 of them, there were 2 green-robed elderly men standing off to the side with overawed expressions. They were naturally the guards of this place, and they were both at the late spatial tempering stage. As soon as Han Li arrived, He released a sliver of his grand ascension stage spiritual pressure, and the pair of elderly men immediately granted him access. At this point, Han Li had already cast his gaze over the contents of the entire crystalline wall, and his attention was currently focused on several ancient golden characters that were ranked third on the list. Profound heavenly spirit/sword, Han Li murmured to himself as he reflexively began to stroke his own forearm. A certain diagram on his forearm began to heat up and throb slightly under his fingertips. Han Li exhaled before suddenly asking, "Is this profound heavenly spirit/sword the newest profound heavenly treasure on the roll? I heard that all races on the Tian Yuan continent had been scrambling to search for it when it first appeared." The two green-robed elderly men exchanged a glance before one of them stepped forward and replied, "Indeed, Senior. When this profound heavenly treasure first appeared on the roll, even some super races from other continents had sent people to search for it, but for some reason, none of them managed to find it, and no news of it arose thereafter. However, I'm sure those major races are still searching for it in secret." "Perhaps so. Let's go now, Brother Zai," Han Li said with a smile, then immediately departed. "We are greatly honored by your visit, seniors." The pair of green-robed elderly men hurriedly extended respectful bows as they spoke. Shortly after their departure, Han Li suddenly asked, "Brother Zai, do you know anything about this chaotic myriad spirit roll?" "I have no recollection of this object, and nor have I ever heard my past master mention it, but I did sense a hint of immortal spiritual chi within it just now." Immortal spiritual chi. Han Li was quite stunned to hear this. "Indeed, it's far from abundant, but it's extremely pure, no less so than the immortal spiritual chi in the spirit liquid you've been providing me with," Taoist Zai replied. "That's quite interesting. It's been many years since our spirit realm lost contact with the true immortal realm, but it seems that some things can't be completely severed," Han Li mused. Taoist Zai's expression remained unchanged, and he offered no response to this. The Holy Island wasn't very large, and with the map provided to him by Li Rong, Han Li soon arrived in front of a small teleportation formation. He stepped into the teleportation formation with Taoist Zai, then made a hand seal, and a buzzing sound rang out as white spiritual light erupted from the formation, following which the duo instantly vanished. In the next instant, white light flashed in front of a pavilion that was around 800 feet tall, and Han Li and Taoist Zai reappeared in another formation. Heavenly Tome Library. Han Li looked up at the massive plaque hanging above the entrance of the pavilion, and a peculiar look flashed through his eyes as he said, "Please wait for me here for now, Brother Zai. I'll be back soon." "Go ahead, fellow Taoist Han," Taoist Zai replied without any hesitation. Han Li nodded in response, before making his way toward the entrance of the pavilion. Moments later, he found himself standing in front of a pale-faced elderly woman. "I've heard that the Heavenly Tome Library holds countless secret techniques. Would you be able to open the restriction and grant me access, fellow Taoist?" The elderly woman was seated at the center of a spacious hall on the first floor, and she appraised Han Li with her brows slightly furrowed as she said, "You're very unfamiliar. Have you only just arrived on the island? Seeing as you've come here, I'm sure you're already aware of the rules of our Heavenly Tome Library." She was unable to detect this person's exact cultivation base, and that naturally came as quite a surprise to her. "In order to learn a secret technique, I have to offer a sum of spirit stones or exchange for it with another secret technique not yet in the library's collection, correct?" Han Li asked with a smile. "That's right. You're planning to issue spirit stones, right? Each secret technique is extremely expensive, but it's easier than offering another secret technique in exchange. There are already over 10,000 secret techniques in the library's collection, so it won't be that easy to find new ones," the elderly woman chuckled. "I see. I actually do have quite a few secret techniques I collected from foreign races. You can examine them to see if there are any new ones," Han Li said with a smile. Before the elderly woman had a chance to respond, Han Li suddenly swept a sleeve through the air, releasing close to 100 jade slips of different colors that hovered before the elderly woman. The elderly woman's mouth gaped open in shock, and only after a long while did she ask, "These jade slips were all collected from foreign races?" "That's right. Go ahead and examine them, fellow Taoist," Han Li replied. "Please give me a moment, fellow Taoist," the elderly woman said as she finally regained her composure. After that, she quickly grabbed a jade slip before injecting his spiritual sense into it. "Origin light splitting technique. Isn't this a renowned secret technique of the flying spirit race? I've heard that only the core flying spirit beings with the purest bloodlines are able to learn this technique. This is indeed a secret technique that our heavenly tome library does not yet possess, the elderly woman said with a stunned expression after a brief examination. Oh, it seems like you're very familiar with foreign secret techniques. This was indeed a secret technique I obtained from the flying spirit race, but it's not suitable for me to cultivate, so I've never used it, Han Li said with a slightly surprised expression. Letter 1D4 1F, letter 1D6 9B, letter 1D5 5 6, letter 1D6 8E, letter 1D5 6 8, letter 1D5 F2, letter 1D4 1C, letter 1D5 FC, letter 1D5 FA. I'm renowned as the leading secret technique expert among our two races. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been assigned with the task of looking after this heavenly tome library, the elderly woman said in a pleased manner. After that, she stowed the jade slip away before taking another one for examination. 9 Flame Devilish Technique. This seems to be a devilish secret technique that's also a new addition to our library. Heavenly Light Azure Wood Arts. This is a wood tribe secret technique that our library already has. The elderly woman was able to determine the origins of most of these jade slips, and it seemed that she wasn't exaggerating about her status as the leading secret technique expert of the two races. After looking through only around a dozen jade slips, the elderly woman was already in shock. Not only did these secret techniques come from a diverse range of origins, around 2/3 of them were new to the Heavenly Tome Library. Generally speaking, one would only be able to bring out 1 or 2 types of secret techniques to be exchanged at the Heavenly Tome Library. Such a large number of secret techniques being offered at once was unheard of. After about 15 minutes, the elderly woman finally examined all of the jade slips, and she exhaled before asking, among these secret techniques, 61 of them are new to the Heavenly Tome Library. Are you planning to exchange all of them? 61, that's not bad. I'll use them to exchange for 61 of the secret techniques in this library, Han Li replied with a smile. In that case, I'll open the restriction right away for you to select other secret techniques. I must remind you that you have to come out right away after completing your selection, and these secret techniques can only be cultivated by yourself. They're not to be given to others. Otherwise, if the Holy Island is made aware of your transgression, you'll be punished by our enforcers, the elderly woman warned. Rest assured, I'll only be referencing most of these secret techniques and only truly cultivate a few of them, and I won't give them to anyone else, Han Li replied, as he swept a sleeve through the air to recover all of the jade slips that were rejected by the elderly woman. Good, I'll be opening the restrictions now, the elderly woman said before opening her mouth to release a shimmering golden badge. She then made a hand seal before pointing a finger at the badge, which immediately released a burst of silver light that surged toward the stairwell. A dull thump rang out from the stairwell as if several invisible restrictions had been opened, and Han Li quickly vanished up the staircase, leaving the elderly woman alone on the first floor. Han Li didn't stay in the pavilion for too long before he re-emerged in a calm manner, then cupped his fist in a salute toward the elderly woman before departing. Who was that? He definitely doesn't seem like an ordinary new body integration cultivator that's just come onto the island. Even I was unable to ascertain his cultivation base, and he was able to bring out so many foreign secret techniques at once. Could it be that he's? The elderly woman murmured to herself, and as she did so, her eyes gradually lit up with a hint of realization. Meanwhile, Han Li had just emerged from the pavilion when 3 balls of golden light suddenly appeared in the air above him. Chapter 22:14. Entering the Elder Devil Realm again. Han Li's expression remained unchanged upon seeing this, and he merely swept a sleeve upward, upon which the balls of golden light instantly disappeared down his sleeve. Han Li then flipped a hand over, and a fist-sized golden beetle appeared on his palm. This was none other than one of 3 faux beetle monarchs that he had sent after the Black Owl monarch. Han Li appraised the golden beetle momentarily before his brows furrowed slightly as he murmured to himself, so the Black Owl monarch managed to escape. Having said that, close to half of his body was devoured, and he was wounded far more than I anticipated, so this isn't a bad result. After that, Han Li stowed the beetle away before a jade slip appeared in his grasp amid a flash of green light. Han Li cast his gaze toward the jade slip, and a faint smile appeared on his face. Even though he had witnessed quite a few powerful techniques in the Heavenly Tome Library, his true objective was the second half of the lightning wheel technique. Back when he had obtained the lightning wheel technique from the demon monarchs of the Earth Abyss, it was an incomplete version. The divine Devilbane lightning that it could unleash was extremely powerful, but it took a very long time to set up and had no use in practical battles. After learning from Master Black Rain that the Holy Island had the second half of the lightning wheel technique, he had immediately made up his mind to get his hands on it. After finding the second half of the lightning wheel technique and discovering that it could match up with the first half, he was naturally ecstatic and immediately took a jade slip containing this technique. As for all of the other secret techniques he had taken with him, those were mere accessories. However, there were some of them that had caught his eye, and he planned to cultivate those when he got back. After quickly assessing the lightning wheel technique recorded in the jade slip to verify that there were no issues, Han Li stowed the jade slip away before making his way toward the teleportation formation not far away. Taoist Zai was still waiting for him there, and he gave Han Li a slight nod. "Sorry to keep you waiting, Brother Zai. Let's go and meet the elders of the Holy Island. I'm sure they're growing tired of waiting," Han Li said with an apologetic smile. Taoist Zai naturally had no objections to this, and thus, the two of them quickly departed using the teleportation formation. Several days later, a white jade arc emerged from the Holy Island before flying away into the distance. Han Li, Taoist Zai, and Silvermoon were all on the arc, and they were accompanied by the white-haired Holy Island elder with the Luo surname. Han Li was standing at the front of the ark with his brows slightly furrowed, seemingly contemplating something quite important. "Fellow Taoist Luo, the Black Owl Monarch has been severely wounded by me, and he won't be plotting against our two races for at least several centuries. As for the other races, I'm sure they wouldn't dare to do anything without Grand Ascension stage beings among their ranks. However, as a safety precaution, you have to ensure that news of my departure doesn't get leaked for at least the next century," Han Li instructed. "Yes, Senior Han, I'll do everything in my power to keep your departure from the spirit realm a secret. Having said that, do you really have to leave so soon, Senior? You've only just reached the Grand Ascension stage. Why don't you take some time to consolidate your cultivation base before entering the Elder Devil realm?" the elderly man asked in a hesitant manner. "It's been a long time since fellow Taoists Mo Jianli and Ao Zio have disappeared in the Elder Devil realm, and they could be in grave danger. How can I continue to delay? As for consolidation, that's not required for me. I progressed to the Grand Ascension stage primarily using a body refinement cultivation art, so I don't need much time for consolidation," Han Li explained with a shake of his head. "In that case, I won't say anything more about this matter. The spatial node that we're traveling to now is one that was used by the devilish army during their retreat. Even though the passageway has already disappeared and transformed into a spatial node, there are occasional reports of violent spatial fluctuations erupting out of it, so it's clear that the interrealm walls in there are still quite fragile. With your powers and that star-defying plate, it should be easy for you to break into the Elder Devil realm. As long as there are no issues with the spatial node, this shouldn't be an issue," Han Li replied. "Senior Han, if you're willing to wait for a while longer, I'm sure the other major races will send more people into the Elder Devil realm to investigate. After all, they also have Grand Ascension stage beings that have disappeared in the Elder Devil realm," Li Rong interjected. Even if that does happen, those people will only be concerned about the Grand Ascension stage beings of their own races. No one will care about beings from small races like ours. Besides, those super races may have already sent more people into the Elder Devil realm to investigate. I'm certainly not going to hold my breath and wait for them to go out of their way to report back to our two races," Han Li chuckled coldly in response. Both Li Rong and Elder Luo fell silent upon hearing this. A thought then seemed to occur to Han Li, and he said, "There's no need for you to be concerned. Brother Zai and Silvermoon will be accompanying me into the Elder Devil realm, so I'll be able to ensure self-preservation. However, it would be unsafe to take Gyur with me, so I'll have to get you to look after her." "Rest assured, Senior Han, we'll take fellow Taoist Ju back with us to cultivate on the Holy Island following your departure," Elder Luo hurriedly replied with a respectful bow. Zhu Gyur pouted slightly with displeasure upon hearing this, but she didn't dare to raise any objections. A faint smile appeared on Han Li's face, and his lips tremored slightly as he transmitted his voice toward Zhu Gyur. "It will take some more time for the entrance to the small spirit sky to open up, so stay on the Holy Island and cultivate for now. After you make some progress, you'll be able to look after yourself once we find the small spirit sky." Zhu Gyur's heart stirred slightly upon hearing this, and she immediately nodded in response. As for Silvermoon, she was very concerned for Patriarch Ao Zio's safety, so she was naturally more than willing to accompany Han Li into the Elder Devil realm. Thus, the Jade Ark continued onward, and after flying for around half a month, it arrived at a lush grassland. After flying deeper into the grassland for 2 days and 2 nights, the Ark stopped above the remains of a stronghold. This should be the place. There were once devilish troops situated here, but it's been abandoned for a long time, Elder Luo said after consulting a formation plate in his hand. Han Li cast his gaze upward upon hearing this, and he discovered that there seemed to be nothing out of the ordinary with this place aside from a blanket of gray clouds in the sky. All of a sudden, Han Li's expression changed slightly as he pointed a finger at his own glabella. A third vertical eye quickly emerged there amid a burst of black chi, and as soon as the eye was opened, it released a beam of black light that vanished high up in the air in a flash. In the next instant, a burst of rumbling rang out within the gray clouds, followed by a burst of faint spatial fluctuations that was detected by everyone on the Ark. Elder Luo and the others were ecstatic to sense this, and Han Li nodded as he withdrew his third eye before sweeping a sleeve through the air. Countless formation treasures immediately shot forth in all directions before vanishing into thin air amid flashes of light. Moments later, Han Li rubbed his hands together before thrusting them downward, releasing a thick bolt of golden lightning that disappeared in a flash. In the next instant, a rumbling thunderclap rang out, and a giant lightning formation that was around an acre in area emerged. Han Li then swept his sleeve downward again, and a ball of white light emerged, containing a disc that was around a foot in size. This was none other than the vastly renowned realm-breaking treasure, the star-defying plate. As soon as the plate was released, it revolved in the air above the giant formation, then transformed into a silver moon that was suspended in midair. "Let's go," Han Li said before taking a step forward and vanishing on the spot. A dull thump rang out as Han Li appeared at the center of the formation down below, with lightning revolving all around him, and Taoist Zai and Silvermoon also followed along. Han Li aimed a parting glance at Elder Luo and Li Rong, then made a hand seal before pointing a finger upward. The silver moon above the formation immediately emitted a clear ringing sound, following which a pillar of 5-colored light was released straight into the gray clouds. At the same time, a loud thunderclap rang out from the formation beneath Han Li, and 6 pillars of black and white light erupted forth, disappearing into the same spot where the pillar of 5-colored light had just struck the gray clouds. An earth-shattering boom rang out, and the silver moon up above immediately vanished, only to be replaced by a giant black hole. Han Li took a deep breath, and golden light radiated from his entire body, sweeping up the 2 people beside him before he flew up as a streak of golden light. A burst of violent spatial fluctuations erupted forth, and the streak of golden light instantly vanished into the black hole. Chapter 22:15 Stembor. In the air above a swamp that was filled with rotting mud, a massive black hole appeared, and a streak of golden light containing several humanoid figures emerged from within the black hole. This was none other than Han Li's trio. Han Li briefly inspected his surroundings, following which his brows furrowed slightly. There was not a single living being around them. After a brief moment of contemplation, Han Li released his spiritual sense through the surrounding area, upon which he immediately discovered that there was a large cluster of stone buildings near the edge of the swamp. There were hundreds of these buildings, and there were several protective formations set up around them. However, these formations had been destroyed, and after sweeping his spiritual sense into the buildings, Han Li discovered that their interiors were completely wrecked, and that there wasn't even a single devilish being within them. Han Li was rather surprised by all of this, but he quickly arrived at a decision. Let's go to the nearest city and find out where we are first. In contrast with when Han Li had last entered the Elder Devil realm, he was now at the Grand Ascension stage and had Taoist Zai by his side, so he had nothing to fear even if he were to encounter one of the 3 devilish patriarchs. Thus, the 3 of them set off, and after flying west for no more than half a day, Han Li's expression suddenly changed slightly as he stopped in midair. Taoist Zai also stopped on the spot as he peered into the distance, while Silvermoon was left feeling rather perplexed as she couldn't see anything in the distance. "What's going on, Brother Han? Have you and Brother Zai discovered something?" Han Li nodded calmly in response. "There's something coming from up ahead." Silvermoon faltered slightly upon hearing this, before hurriedly casting her gaze into the distance as well. A short while later, a strange buzzing sound rang out in the distance, and it became louder and louder, seemingly drawing closer to them. Moments later, spiritual light flashed up ahead, and several hundred streaks of light emerged before hurtling directly toward Han Li. These were hundreds of devilish beings of different cultivation bases, and they were fleeing for their lives as if they were being pursued by something extremely fearsome. Just as Silvermoon was wondering what it could be that was chasing these devilish beings, a massive dark cloud appeared up ahead amid a loud buzzing sound, surging along in hot pursuit of the devilish beings. Silvermoon hurriedly injected her spiritual power into her eyes as she peered carefully into the gray cloud, upon which her face immediately paled in horror. The gray cloud was made up of countless strangely shaped insects. The insects ranged from the size of human fists to around the size of a grown man. They either had hooked spikes all over their bodies, or mouths full of sharp fangs, and their appearances were vastly different from all ordinary devilish insects. Some of the largest insects even had two heads, seemingly being the leaders of the swarm. In the face of such a fearsome insect cloud, it was no wonder that Silvermoon was displaying such a fearful reaction. The insects within the swarm were all flying at different speeds, with the larger insects clearly faster than their smaller counterparts. In the blink of an eye, some of the devilish beings that were lagging behind were caught by the larger insects. These devilish beings had no choice but to fight while they fled, and fierce battles quickly erupted. However, as soon as these devilish beings slowed down a little, the rest of the insect swarm immediately caught up and devoured them. A string of agonized howls rang out as all of the devilish beings that were lagging behind instantly disappeared within the sea of insects, and Han Li's expression finally changed slightly upon seeing this. He suddenly turned to Taoist Zai and asked, "Brother Zai, do you see any difference between these insects and the other devilish insects of this realm? Their auras are different, and their devilish chi is rather impure. It seems they're not originally from the Elder Devil realm," Taoist Zai replied. "I see, so these insects must be related to the Stembora Queen," Han Li sighed. Silvermoon drew a sharp breath upon hearing this. The Stembora Queen, is that the creature that's behind the tribulation of the Elder Devil realm and forced my grandfather and Senior Mo to enter the Elder Devil realm? "That's right," Han Li replied with a wry smile. "If these insects are related to the Stembora Queen, and they've appeared in the Elder Devil realm in such huge numbers, does that mean that the Stembora Queen has already escaped from its seal?" Silvermoon asked with a strained expression. "Not necessarily. Maybe these are only descendants of the Stembora Queen," Han Li replied with a shake of his head. Silvermoon wanted to ask another question, but during this short period of time, over half of the fleeing devilish beings had been devoured by the swarm of insects, and only a dozen or so remained. All of them were high-grade devilish beings, but they were extremely disheveled and wore horrified expressions. Even with the naked eye alone, Han Li was able to clearly see the expressions of the devilish beings at the front of the group. These devilish beings were quite taken aback to see Han Li's trio hovering in midair, seemingly completely disregarding the swarm of insects in the distance. A devilish woman who appeared to be in her 20s yelled in an urgent voice, "What are you standing there for? The Stemboras are here. Hurry up and run for your lives." Immediately thereafter, she whizzed right past Han Li's trio and continued to flee into the distance. A faint smile appeared on Han Li's face as he cast his gaze toward the insect cloud, then suddenly swept a sleeve through the air. 3 miniature mountains immediately appeared before him amid a resounding boom, and they instantly swelled to tens of thousands of feet tall before hurtling directly toward the insect cloud. At the same time, the gray insects swarmed around the 3 giant mountains and completely surrounded them. Han Li pointed a finger toward the distance, and the 3 mountains began to revolve on the spot. Gray light was released from the black mountain, and all of the insects that came into contact with this gray light instantly vanished. Meanwhile, countless streaks of invisible sword chi were being released by the azure mountain, slicing countless insects into dismembered pieces that rained down from above alongside a shower of green blood. As for the 5-colored mountain, it was releasing radiant 5-colored halos that instantly crushed all of the insects in its wake into mincemeat amid a string of anguished howls. In the blink of an eye, 3 massive areas had been cleared out within the sea of insects. Regardless of how many insects swarmed toward the 3 giant mountains, they were all killed without any exception. Shortly thereafter, the gray insect swarm had become extremely sparse. All of a sudden, one of the remaining 2-headed giant insects let loose a shrill cry, and all of the insects immediately turned around and fled. Han Li's eyes lit up slightly upon seeing this, and he immediately pointed a finger at the black mountain in the distance. The black mountain instantly vanished amid a burst of gray light at his behest, then emerged without any warning above the two-headed giant insect, alongside a burst of spatial fluctuations. Gray light swept forth from the underside of the black mountain, and the giant two-headed insect only had a chance to let loose a despairing cry before it vanished amid the gray light with all of the other insects around it. At this point, the remaining insects had already fled into the distance, and they quickly disappeared out of sight. Han Li seemed to have no intention of continuing to pursue these insects, and he merely waved a nonchalant hand toward the distance. The three giant mountains quickly shrank down to around a foot tall each, then disappeared into thin air. Letter 1D4 BB, letter 1D4 5F, letter 1D6 26, letter 1D6 26, letter 1D6 38, letter 212F, letter 1D6 24, letter 1D6 30, letter 1D6 2E. In the next instant, spatial fluctuations erupted within one of Han Li's sleeves, and the three miniature mountains reappeared before vanishing in a flash once again. Only the span of a few breaths had passed since Han Li had first released his three extreme mountains, and the devilish woman who was fleeing for her life took a quick glance behind herself, upon which she almost plummeted out of the sky. "How is that possible?" the woman exclaimed with incredulity in her eyes. The other fleeing devilish beings faltered slightly upon hearing this, then also turned their attention toward the same direction, and they were naturally stunned as well. The fearsome insect swarm that had been pursuing them had suddenly disappeared without a trace, and all of them drew to a halt before casting their eyes toward Han Li's trio with astonished expressions. It was clear that these three had something to do with the insect swarm's sudden disappearance. The devilish woman was the first to return to her senses, and she carefully appraised Han Li's trio while contemplating whether she should approach them. Right at this moment, Han Li's voice rang out in the ears of all of the devilish beings in the group. "Please come over here. I have some questions I'd like to ask you." The devilish woman's heart jolted slightly upon hearing this, and she did as she was told after a brief moment of hesitation. The other devilish beings didn't dare to disobey Han Li's orders, and they also flew over to him. Han Li had eradicated the insect cloud with ease, so he was definitely far too powerful for them to oppose. Chapter 22:16, Black Gourd City. The devilish woman was the first to arrive, and she didn't dare to get too close as she extended a respectful salute from around 70 feet away. "Thank you for saving our lives, seniors." She was completely unable to ascertain the cultivation bases of Han Li's trio with her spiritual sense, and that prompted her to act in an even more respectful manner. "Who are you and where is the nearest city?" Han Li asked in a concise manner. "We are crystal gatherers from Chaotic Cloud Mountain, and the nearest city is Black Gourd City. If you want to go there, we'd be happy to lead the way, senior," the devilish woman replied. "Black Gourd City? I've never heard of it before. There's no need for you to lead the way, just give me a map of this area," Han Li instructed. "I just so happen to have a detailed map of this nearby area. It would be my honor to offer it to you, senior," the devilish woman said as she immediately offered up a black stone shard with both hands. Han Li nodded as he drew the stone shard into his own grasp, then injected his spiritual sense into it, upon which a pleased look appeared on his face. At this point, the other devilish beings had also already arrived, and they were all standing in a nervous silence. "What's the deal with the stem borers you mentioned earlier? I don't recall such an insect in our holy realm, and their auras are slightly different from normal devilish insects as well," Han Li inquired as he stowed the stone shard away. "Do you not know of these stem borers, senior?" the devilish woman asked as a hesitant look appeared on her face, and a stir also ran through the other devilish beings, but none of them dared to say anything. "I've been in seclusion for the past few centuries. Is it very strange that I don't know of them?" Han Li asked. "I see, then it's no wonder that you're not aware of these stem borers. These insects have only appeared in the past century, and apparently they were originally all ordinary devilish insects, but for some reason they suddenly mutated into their current forms. These stem borers are currently wreaking havoc across the entire holy realm, and there are even stories of entire cities being massacred by these insects. As a result, there's been a lot of unrest in our holy realm, and everyone is living in constant fear," the devilish woman explained. "Oh, have the three patriarchs and other sacred ancestors not stepped in to exterminate these stem borers? They're certainly more powerful than normal devilish insects, but they can still be easily killed by sacred ancestors," Han Li asked. With my lowly cultivation base, I don't have access to information about what the patriarchs and sacred ancestors are doing. All I know is that only a few sacred ancestors have stepped in areas where stem borer infestations have been too severe. As for the rest of the sacred ancestors and the three patriarchs, all of them seem to have disappeared at once, the devilish woman replied after a brief hesitation. All of the sacred ancestors have disappeared. When did this happen? Han Li immediately continued in his line of questioning. I can't give you an exact time, but it seems to coincide with when the first stem borers began to appear, the devilish woman replied in a respectful manner. All right, that's all I need to know. You can go now, Han Li instructed in an indifferent manner. The devilish woman was quite relieved to hear this, and she said in a respectful voice, "Yes, we'll be taking our leave now, Senior." After that, she quickly departed, and the other devilish beings hurriedly followed along after extending respectful bows toward Han Li's trio. Following their departure, Silvermoon sighed. It looks like all of the Grand Ascension stage beings really have encountered some trouble. Otherwise, the situation in the Elder Devil realm wouldn't be this bad. The current state of affairs is indeed quite grim, but we'll have to do some further investigation if we want to know exactly what's happening. I presume there are devilish lords in Black Gourd City, and I'm sure they'll know some things about the sacred ancestors and the Grand Ascension stage beings from our spirit realm, Han Li said as a solemn look appeared on his face. Silvermoon smiled and replied, "You're right, let's make a trip to Black Gourd City then, Brother Han." There's something that I have to do before that. Han Li chuckled before sweeping a sleeve through the air to release a burst of gray light, within which was contained a giant gray insect. It was none other than the two-headed stem borer that he had just captured. The insect possessed an aura that was around the late deity transformation stage, and clearly held an important position in the insect swarm. As soon as the insect appeared, it immediately began to flap its wings desperately in an attempt to escape. However, Han Li instantly released his terrifying aura, and the giant insect was slammed back down onto the ground by a burst of enormous invisible force. The giant insect's two heads thrashed violently, but its body was completely immobilized, and it could only let loose bursts of fearful cries. Han Li reached a hand out of his sleeve before pressing it toward one of the giant insect's heads, and 5 translucent threads shot forth from his fingertips before vanishing into the insect's head. The struggling insect immediately shuddered before slumping onto the ground in a motionless manner, and at the same time, Han Li closed his eyes as faint golden light appeared all over his body. He was unleashing a soul search technique on this giant insect. After about 15 minutes had passed, Han Li opened his eyes, and the translucent threads were withdrawn from the giant insect's head before disintegrating into specks of translucent light. The giant insect's head then began to fluctuate unsteadily in size before abruptly exploding. Han Li swept a sleeve through the air again, and a fireball shot forth to instantly incinerate the insect carcass into ashes. "Did you get any information, Brother Han?" Silvermoon asked. "I'm afraid not. This insect only has the most basic instincts and possesses no intelligence, so I couldn't find out anything," Han Li replied with a shake of his head. "I see, that's not too much of a surprise. These stem borers have suddenly become very powerful due to their mutations, but it's not that easy to attain intelligence, and that's good news for us," Silvermoon said with a smile. "Indeed, if the stem borers are only relying on basic instincts, then they won't pose a threat to us no matter how many of them there are. Let's go to Black Gourd City now. I'm sure we'll be able to get some information there," Han Li replied. Thus, the three of them rose up into the air and flew north. 3 days later, Han Li's trio entered a highland that was full of black mud, and after flying for several more hours, a black city with an area of around 200 kilometers appeared in the distance. This was none other than Black Gourd City. However, the entire city was currently surrounded from all directions by another gray sea of insects with no end in sight, and the sounds of battle were audible even from extremely far away. This sea of stem borers covered virtually the entire sky, and even though the stem borer swarm that Han Li had witnessed before was also extremely large, it was nothing compared to this one. Currently, Black Gourd City was enshrouded under a black light barrier that sat atop the city like a giant upside-down bowl. Dense layers of stem borers covered every single inch of the light barrier, and they were all attacking the light barrier in a frenzy. Within the light barrier were countless devilish beings that were using devilish treasures of different descriptions or unleashing devilish techniques to strike back at the stem borers. The stem-borers currently attacking the city were clearly not that powerful, and they were being quickly slain by the attacks being unleashed by the devilish beings in the city. There were also arrows flying out of the city like a torrential storm to exterminate even more of the stem-borers. At the center of the city stood hundreds of tall towers that were rumbling incessantly, around which lightning was flashing incessantly. Hundreds of bolts of black lightning were constantly being released by these towers, before splitting up into countless threads of black lightning that were reducing hordes upon hordes of stem-borers to ashes. It seemed that under the protection of the city's restrictions, the devilish beings could attack with reckless abandon and held the firm upper hand. However, as blue light flashed through Han Li's eyes, he was able to ascertain the true nature of the situation, and his brows immediately furrowed slightly. During this brief period of time, the black light barrier over the city had already dimmed slightly, and the devilish beings unleashing attacks from within the city were all in very bad condition, clearly already beginning to overexert their magic power. All of a sudden, the rumbling in the city drew to an abrupt halt, and all of the towers ceased their lightning attacks. Chapter 22:17 Stunning Display of Power. Without the assistance of the lightning being released by the towers, the offensive power of the city was reduced by close to half, and layers upon layers of stem-borers landed on the light barrier, causing it to dim at a rapid rate that was discernible even to the naked eye. "We have to save this city," Han Li suddenly said with furrowed brows. Silver Moon nodded in response. "Brother Zai, in order to resolve this issue as soon as possible, I'll have to get you to assist the two of us," Han Li said. "No problem," Taoist Zai replied in a calm manner. Thus, Han Li swept a sleeve through the air, releasing the three miniature extreme mountains amid a flash of spiritual light. Immediately thereafter, he made a hand seal, and the Provenance True Devil projection emerged behind him. The projection opened its 6 eyes at his behest, then let loose a long cry akin to a dragon's roar. The roar erupted directly up into the heavens, unleashing invisible sound waves that surged toward the sea of stem-borers. The devilish beings in Black Gorge City were quite alarmed to hear this thunderous roar, yet before they had a chance to look for where the sound was coming from, the majority of the stem-borers that were attacking the light barrier either self-detonated or plummeted out of the sky without any warning. In the blink of an eye, only less than half of the insect swarm remained, and the ones that did remain had been thrown into complete disarray. Right at this moment, spatial fluctuations erupted overhead, and 3 gargantuan mountains appeared above the sea of insects in a flash. The giant mountains then came crashing down in unison, and in the next instant, vast expanses of light began to wreak havoc through the insect swarm alongside streaks of lethal sword chi. The stem-borers were completely powerless to resist, as they were felled in hordes by the 3 mountains, and only a few stem-borers that were clearly far larger than their brethren were able to pose some resistance as they fled in a blind panic. However, right at this moment, a thick bolt of silver lightning suddenly appeared up above amid a rumbling thunderclap, and the bolt of lightning instantly flashed through the bodies of the giant stem-borers, reducing them to ashes alongside thousands of normal stem-borers in the nearby area. After the silver lightning dissipated, a young man in a set of Taoist robes emerged in midair. It was none other than Taoist Zai. Taoist Zai cast his gaze toward the giant stem-borers that had fled even further into the distance, and lightning flashed from his body as he shot forth once again as an arc of lightning. Countless stem-borers were felled in his wake, and all of a sudden, the Provenance True Devil projection, which had swelled to tens of thousands of feet tall, appeared within the sea of insects amid an earth-shattering boom. Han Li was standing at the center of the projection, with his hands clasped behind his back, appraising the nearby stem-borers in a completely expressionless manner. There were currently countless purple runes flashing over the body of the massive projection, and as it swept its 6 arms through the air, silver fireballs were sent flying in all directions. The silver fireballs quickly formed vast expanses of silver flames, each of which was around an acre in size, and the flames quickly engulfed large patches of stem-borers. Regardless of whether it was the normal stem-borers or their larger counterparts, all of them began to struggle violently upon coming into contact with the silver flames before instantly being incinerated into nothingness. In the face of Han Li and Taoist Zai, this virtually endless swarm of stem-borers was being slaughtered at a rapid rate. However, the normal stem-borers were completely fearless even in the face of death, and they abandoned the assault against Black Gorge City as they flew directly toward Han Li and Taoist Zai in a suicidal manner. Even with Han Li and Taoist Zai's incredible powers, it took them quite a while to completely clear the nearby area. However, there were still some giant stem borers that managed to escape, but Han Li had no interest in pursuing them. He waved a hand toward Taoist Zai, then slowly descended toward Black Gourd City. Silvermoon also flew over to Han Li in an unhurried manner, and the two of them descended toward the city together. The countless devilish beings in Black Gourd City had been completely rooted to the spot by the display of power put on by Han Li and Taoist Zai, and now that the entire sea of stem borers had been eradicated, all of them instantly erupted into thunderous cheers. As Han Li's trio descended toward the city, a few high-grade devilish beings hurriedly rushed out and opened up a gap in the light barrier, then extended respectful salutes as they welcomed Han Li and the others into the city. An early body integration stage black-robed middle-aged man extended a deep bow toward Han Li and Taoist Zai, then said in a grateful manner, "Thank you for saving the tens of millions of citizens in our Black Gourd City, seniors. May I have the honor of knowing your name? Our Black Gourd City will never forget what you've done for us." As for the normal devilish beings nearby, they had all fallen to their knees and pressed their faces onto the ground, not even daring to look at Han Li and Taoist Zai. It was clear that in the eyes of normal devilish beings, sacred ancestors were virtually gods. Now that two sacred ancestors had suddenly appeared here, all of the devilish beings in the city were naturally ecstatic. "There's no need for you to know our names. Where is your city lord? Get him to come and see me," Han Li instructed. "Our city lord has severely overexerted himself during the resistance against the stem borers, and he's currently resting in his manor, but I've already sent people to notify him of your arrival, so he should be here soon," the middle-aged man replied in a careful manner. "In that case, I'll wait for him here. As for everyone else, they can go and do whatever it is that they need to do," Han Li instructed in an indifferent manner. "Yes, senior, I'll get them to leave right away," the middle-aged man hurriedly replied with a respectful bow, then issued an instruction to all of the devilish beings in the surrounding area. The normal devilish beings nearby hurriedly rose to their feet, then bowed 3 times toward Han Li's trio before departing. Thus, Han Li's trio and a few high-grade devilish beings were the only ones left in the area. After no more than 15 minutes had passed, a streak of black light rose up from a certain tall building in the city, then immediately sped toward Han Li's direction. The black light faded, and a thin elderly man in a set of brocade robes appeared just over 100 feet away from Han Li. The elderly man quickly swept his spiritual sense toward Han Li's trio before immediately extending a deep bow. "Junior Hu Yan pays his respects to his seniors. Thank you for saving our city from what would have been certain destruction." "You're the city lord?" Han Li asked in an expressionless manner. "Letter 1D5F3, letter 1D69B, letter 1D5F2, letter 1D556, letter 1D568, letter 1D556, letter 1D5F0, letter 1D5FC, letter 1D55E. The elderly man was at the mid-body integration stage, and he replied with a fawning smile, "I've been the lord of Black Gourd City for over 1,000 years. If there's anything I can do for you, please feel free to tell me." Han Li nodded with a pleased expression at the sight of Hu Yan's respectful display, then turned to the other devilish lords as he said, "You can all go now. I wish to speak to fellow Taoist Hu alone." The middle-aged man naturally didn't dare to go against Han Li's orders, and he immediately replied, "We'll be taking our leave then, senior." Moments later, Hu Yan and Han Li's trio were the only ones left in the area. Hu Yan was naturally extremely nervous to be in the presence of 2 grand ascension stage beings, but he maintained an extremely respectful expression and stood with his hands by his sides. "I'm sure such a massive swarm of stem borers couldn't have gathered in a short time. When did they start attacking your Black Gourd City?" Han Li asked. "Those stem borers only appeared in the area several years ago, and I've led many hunting parties to exterminate them, but was unable to kill all of them. Much to my surprise, they were able to organize a swarm of such terrifying proportions and attack our city only 2 days ago," Hu Yan replied. "They only appeared 2 days ago. These stem borers may not be very intelligent, but it seems that they do have some organizational abilities," Han Li said as he stroked his own chin in a contemplative manner. "Indeed, senior, there are simply too many of these stem borers for them to be completely exterminated, and the swarms are constantly merging together to bolster their numbers. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so many horrific instances of entire cities in our holy realm being massacred by stem borer swarms," Hu Yan hurriedly explained. Setting that aside for now, there's something else I want to ask you, Han Li said after a brief pause. Please go ahead, Senior, Hu Yan prompted. My fellow Taoists and I have only recently come out of a long period of seclusion, and the appearance of these stem borers came as quite a surprise to us. What I want to ask you is, where are the three patriarchs and other sacred ancestors? Why haven't they appeared to exterminate these stem borers? I heard that they all disappeared under mysterious circumstances not long after these stem borers appeared. Why is that? Han Li asked. Ah, so you've only recently come out of a lengthy seclusion. It's no wonder that I'm not familiar with the two of you. About the patriarchs and other sacred ancestors. A hesitant look appeared on Hu Yan's face. A faint smile appeared on Han Li's face upon seeing this, and he said, "Let me guess, the patriarchs and sacred ancestors are currently dealing with the stem borer queen, and you were told not to tell anyone about this, is that correct?" Chapter 22:18 Sacred Ancestor Zai Lion. Hu Yan faltered slightly upon hearing this before a relieved look appeared on his face. So you already know about the stem borer queen. In that case, there's nothing for me to hide. I heard about the stem borer queen quite a few years ago, and it's why I decided to come out of seclusion. However, I'm not too familiar with the current situation in our holy realm, so you'll have to enlighten me, Han Li said. Yes, Senior. I only began hearing about these things in the past decade or so I don't know too much either. What I do know is that these stem borers in our holy realm were once normal devilish insects that mutated after coming into the contact with the aura of the stem borer queen that seeped through the seal. Following their mutations, these stem borers become significantly more powerful, and their reproductive abilities are also enhanced by close to 100-fold. Otherwise, they wouldn't have become such a huge problem in such a short time. Hu Yan paused momentarily here before continuing. According to what I've heard, the three patriarchs and other sacred ancestors are indeed dealing with the stem borer queen at the original sealed site. In the beginning, things seemed to be going quite well. With assistance from powerful beings of other realms, the seal was constantly being bolstered, and it appeared that the stem borer queen would be sealed away again. However, close to 30 years ago, the original sealed site suddenly lost all contact with the outside world, and no one knows what's happening in there. They lost contact. How is that possible with so many Grand Ascension stage beings there? Hasn't anyone gone there to assess the situation? Han Li asked with furrowed brows. By the time it was discovered that contact had been lost, it was already too late. Countless stem borers had appeared around the original sealed site, taking over many of the nearby cities. There are even high-grade stem borers among them that possess body integration stage powers, and their presence makes it impossible for anyone to access the original sealed site, Hu Yan replied. Body integration stage stem borers. Considering how fearsome the stem borer queen is, it's no surprise to see stem borers of this level. Aren't there some sacred ancestors who haven't entered the original sealed site yet? Why aren't they doing anything? Han Li asked. I don't know what those sacred ancestors' intentions are, but I haven't heard of any of them traveling to the original sealed site to examine the situation there. As for why that is, that's not something for a lowly city lord like me to know, Hu Yan replied with a wry smile. Interesting. It seems that the other sacred ancestors must know something that we don't. Among the sacred ancestors that have yet to enter the original sealed site, which one is closest to Black Gourd City? Han Li asked. The sacred ancestor closest to this city is Sacred Ancestor Zai Lion of the Myriad Flower Mountain Range. 3 years ago, Senior Zai Lion eradicated all of the stem borers near the Myriad Flower Mountain Range, Hu Yan replied. Where is the Myriad Flower Mountain Range? Do you have a map of that area? Han Li asked in a nonchalant manner. I do. I once traveled to the Myriad Flower Mountain Range to request an audience with Senior Zai Lion, so I have a copy of the map of that area, Hu Yan said as he immediately produced a stone shard before offering it to Han Li with both hands. Han Li accepted the stone shard before briefly injecting his spiritual sense into it, upon which a smile appeared on his face. That's all I needed to know. You can go now, fellow Taoist. Yes, I'll be taking my leave now, Senior. Hu Yan was very relieved to hear this, and he extended a respectful bow before departing. A group of high-grade devilish beings that were waiting nearby immediately gathered around Hu Yan, and they flew into the city together. Let's pay this sacred ancestor Zai Lion a visit, Han Li said in a calm manner. Silvermoon and Taoist Zai naturally had no objections to this. Thus, Han Li raised a hand to release a black devilish flying carriage, and the three got onto the carriage before it flew away as a streak of black light. They A month later, Han Li's trio appeared in the air above a lush mountain range that looked as if it could easily belong in the spirit realm. So this is the Myriad Flower Mountain Range. I have to say, this sacred ancestor Zai Lion has found a really nice and scenic location. Where is he residing on this mountain range? Silvermoon asked. The map indicates that this sacred ancestor Zai Lion is living on a mountain known as Sky-Facing Peak, which is situated at the center of this mountain range. Han Li replied with a smile. In that case, it shouldn't be too hard to find him. However, our visit is quite abrupt, and we didn't get a chance to gather any information on what type of person this sacred ancestor is. I hope he's not too inhospitable, Silvermoon mused. Regardless of how hostile and inhospitable he may be, we have to make him tell us what's happened in the original sealed site. Only then can we devise a plan for how to proceed. Of course, it would be even better if we can directly find out the whereabouts of Senior Ao Zio and Senior Mo Giantly, Han Li said in a confident manner. A hint of concern flashed through Silvermoon's eyes at the mention of her grandfather, and she nodded in response. Let's go. This mountain range isn't very large, so it won't take us much time to get to Sky-Facing Peak. Thus, Han Li set off as a streak of azure light, followed closely by Silvermoon and Taoist Zai. Several hours later, the mountain range parted, and a massive white mountain that extended all the way up into the clouds appeared up ahead. The mountain was hundreds of thousands of feet tall, and its top half was entirely covered in white ice and snow, while its bottom half was enshrouded within layers of black mist, within which fierce winds and ghastly howls could be heard. Han Li's trio stopped close to 10 kilometers away from the mountain, and Silvermoon was quite startled by the mountain's peculiar appearance. This sky-facing peak really is no ordinary mountain. This is just an illusion. It'll work on normal devilish beings, but it can't fool the likes of Brother Zai and myself, Han Li said with a faint smile as blue light flashed within his eyes. An illusion. Silvermoon's eyes widened as she carefully appraised the mountain in the distance, but couldn't find anything amiss. Han Li chuckled as he made a hand seal, and a third demonic eye instantly appeared on his glabella. He then let loose a low cry, and a translucent pillar of light that was around as thick a human thumb shot forth before vanishing into the distance. All of a sudden, a burst of powerful energy fluctuations erupted in the distance amid a resounding boom, and ripples surged through the air several kilometers away, following which the scene up ahead completely transformed. The massive mountain disappeared, and a huge basin with an area of around 100 kilometers took its place. At the center of the basin was a beautiful mountain that was tens of thousands of feet tall, and in contrast with the gargantuan foreboding mountain from before, this one was riddled with exotic plants and flowers, and enshrouded within a layer of resplendent five-colored light. Han Li's gaze was immediately drawn to a palace on the mountain summit. The palace was around several acres in area, and was entirely of an exuberant green color, looking as if it had been constructed from fresh wood. So this is the true sky-facing peak, Silvermoon murmured to herself. A faint smile appeared on Han Li's face, yet just as he was about to say something in response, when a female voice suddenly rang out from the scenic mountain. Who has paid my sky-facing peak a visit? Please forgive me for not coming out to greet you sooner, fellow Taoists. As soon as the voice trailed off, a streak of green light rose up into the air from the palace before flying directly toward Han Li. After just a few flashes, the streak of light faded close to 200 feet away, revealing a woman in a green palatial dress. Han Li's expression changed drastically as soon as he caught sight of the woman, and he exclaimed, "Bao Hua! Wait, you're not Bao Hua." The woman was extremely similar to Bao Hua in appearance, but upon closer inspection, one would discover that she carried herself in a manner that was completely different from Bao Hua. The three of you must not be from our holy realm, right? Otherwise, there's no way you would have mistaken me for Bao Hua, the woman said as she carefully appraised Han Li's trio. At this point, Han Li had reverted back to his usual calm expression, and he said, "We came directly to see you, so we had no intention of concealing our origins in the first place. Having said that, you gave me quite a surprise. May I ask if you're related to Bao Hua in any way?" "Bao Hua and I are identical twins. All of the sacred ancestors of our holy realm are aware of this, so I knew you had to be from a foreign realm," the woman replied. "I see, no wonder you bear such a close resemblance to Bao Hua. I'm sure you already know why we're here, right, fellow Taoist Zai Lion?" Han Li asked with a hint of a smile on his face. You're here to find information about what's happening in the original sealed site, right? Xylian asked. Chapter 22:19, White Light Realm. Oh, you don't seem surprised by our visit, fellow Taoist Xylian, Han Li said as his eyes narrowed slightly. Are the three of you from the spirit realm or the black flame realm? Sacred ancestor Xylian asked in an expressionless manner. How can you be so sure that we're from one of those two realms? Han Li asked. Among the realms that have sent out powerful beings to assist our holy realm, only the black flame realm and spirit realm are still yet to contact us, sacred ancestor Xylian replied. What do you mean by us? Han Li asked as his expression changed slightly. I'm referring to the sacred ancestors who have still yet to enter the original sealed site. Even though I've been residing in seclusion in this mountain range, I've kept in constant contact with the other fellow Taoists. For foreign beings like you who want to learn about the situation in the original sealed site, your best option is naturally to seek out one of us, Xylian replied. I see. We are indeed from the spirit realm. Judging from what you just said, it seems you're very familiar with the situation in the original sealed site, Han Li said. So you're from the spirit realm. You look rather familiar, fellow Taoist. Have you entered our holy realm before? Xylian asked with a contemplative expression, seemingly completely unbothered by the fact that Han Li's trio had come from the spirit realm. Han Li faltered slightly upon seeing this before a smile appeared on his face. I have indeed visited this realm once before. It looks like you've already identified me, so why ask a question you already know the answer to? So you really are the cultivator with the Han surname that Yuan Yan and Liu Jai had once placed on their wanted list. Back when you left our holy realm, you were still a body integration cultivator, yet you're already at the grand ascension stage now. I finally understand why those two held you in such high regard. In that case, this fellow Taoist must be fellow Taoist Zai from the devilish origin sea. I'm one of the very few sacred ancestors who have yet to travel to the devilish origin sea to see Brother Zai. It's a pleasure to meet you now, Xylian said, completely ignoring the early body integration stage Silvermoon. It was clear that she didn't regard anyone below the grand ascension state as worthy of her attention. Taoist Zai's expression remained indifferent, and he displayed no intention of replying. However, Han Li raised an eyebrow as he said, seeing as you've identified Brother Zai, I won't have to make an introduction. You still haven't given me any information about what's happening in the original sealed site. I know a thing or two about the situation there, but this is a very important matter that we shouldn't be discussing here. Please come with me to my palace first, fellow Taoists, Xylian invited. Han Li cast his gaze toward the mountain down below, and his brows furrowed ever so slightly. An amused look appeared on Xylian's face as she chuckled. Are you worried that I would try to plot against you, fellow Taoist Han? I'm sure someone of your lofty status wouldn't stoop to something like that, unless you're confident enough to think that you can take on two grand ascension stage beings at once, Han Li chuckled. Then please go ahead, Xylian said with a smile as she turned slightly to the side. Thus, Han Li swept a sleeve through the air, releasing a burst of golden light that encompassed both Taoist Zai and Silvermoon before flying toward the mountain in the distance, followed closely by sacred ancestor Xylian. The five-colored light enshrouding the mountain parted, and Han Li and the others flew into the restriction before landing in front of the entrance of the palace on the mountain peak. Right at this moment, a pair of burly men in a set of strange attire emerged from within the palace. These two men had very dark skin and were both wearing suits of silver armor. However, their arms were bared and etched with a series of crimson spirit patterns. Furthermore, their eyes were of a shimmering silver color and were devoid of pupils, presenting a very peculiar appearance. One of the two men was completely bald, while the other had a head of disheveled long hair. Both of them had thick golden bands around their arms and were very muscular in appearance. As soon as their eyes fell upon Han Li, a slight chill ran down Han Li's spine, and he murmured, "Those two are both grand ascension stage beings." Silvermoon immediately drew a sharp breath upon hearing this. Indeed, both of these burly men were also grand ascension stage beings, but their auras were completely different compared to those of devilish beings. Are these three also reinforcements from another foreign realm, fellow Taoist Xylian? Why is there a body integration stage being among them? The bald man asked in a gravelly voice. Fellow Taoist Han, these two are Brother Jin Chai and Brother Shi Ding from the White Light Realm. They arrived here around half a month earlier than the three of you. Brother Jin, this is fellow Taoist Han and this is fellow Taoist Zai. Both of them are from the spirit realm, Zai Lion introduced with a smile. The spirit realm. Isn't that the realm that was in conflict with your elder devil realm not long ago? I thought they weren't even going to send anyone, the bald man said with a hint of disdain in his voice. If the Stembora Queen breaks out of its seal, all of the nearby realms will be in grave peril, so our spirit realm naturally can't just stand by and watch. Having said that, it's the first time I've heard of the White Light Realm, Han Li said in a calm manner. HMPH, your ignorance is truly astounding. Don't tell me you've only just progressed to the Grand Ascension stage, the bald man said in a cold voice, while his companion remained completely silent and expressionless, just like Taoist Zai. Han Li was just about to say something in response when Zai Lion interjected. I'm sure you didn't come to my palace to bicker with one another, right, fellow Taoists? Seeing as all of you came here for the Stembora Queen, let's talk about that. You've always wanted to hear about the situation in the original sealed site, right, Brother Jin? Now that fellow Taoist has also arrived, I'll elaborate on the situation to all of you. Jin Chai's expression changed slightly upon hearing this, and he nodded in response. Brother Shi and I are naturally happy to hear what you have to say. After that, Jin Chai returned to the palace with his companion, and Zai Lion turned to Han Li before making an inviting hand gesture. After you, fellow Taoist Han. Han Li gave her a faint smile, before making his way into the palace with Silver Moon and Taoist Zai, followed by sacred ancestor Zai Lion. We pay our respects to Mistress Zai Lion. The palace wasn't very large, but the corridor behind the front gate was lined with around 40 female servants in palatial dresses, and they all extended respectful bows towards sacred ancestor Zai Lion. Prepare some spirit fruits and spirit tea. We have some important guests, Zai Lion instructed. Some of the servants immediately gave affirmative responses before departing, while Han Li and the others followed Zai Lion into the main hall of the palace. The two Grand Ascension stage beings from the White Light Realm were already seated there, and their lips were trembling slightly as they communicated with one another through voice transmission. Han Li's trio took a seat across from those two, while Zai Lion sat down on the main seat. Fellow Taoist Zai Lion, now that everyone's here, can you disclose the information to us? Jin Chai asked in a direct manner. Zai Lion's smile faded slightly upon hearing this, and a serious look appeared on her face. Of course, but before that, I have a question for all of you. Have you come here to help our holy realm seal the Stembora Queen again, or are you here to rescue your brethren from your respective races? Why do you ask, fellow Taoist Zai Lion? Do these two objectives conflict with one another? Jin Chai asked as his expression changed slightly. And Li's brows also furrowed slightly upon hearing this unexpected question. I don't want to disappoint all of you, but the situation is very urgent, and we'll only have time to do one of those things. On top of that, regardless of which option we choose, we have to focus all of our power on that one objective for any chance of success. This is why I haven't disclosed the situation at the original sealed site to you before this, Brother Jin, Zai Lion said, as a wry smile appeared on her face. HMPH, so you're telling me that the arrival of these two gave you the confidence to disclose this information to us? Jin Chai harumphed in a displeased manner. Even if fellow Taoist Han hadn't arrived, I would have disclosed the information to you in another month at most anyway. Us sacred ancestors are going to be meeting up in a month to discuss how to save our holy realm with all of our allies that have arrived from the other realms, and I'm sure you wouldn't want to miss that occasion, Zai Lion revealed. Fellow Taoist Zai Lion, regardless of what our objectives are, I think it would be better if you disclose the situation in the original sealed site first before we make our decision, Han Li said. Chapter 2220, The Truth. I agree with fellow Taoist Han there, Jin Chai chimed in agreement. I'm naturally willing to disclose the situation in the original sealed site to all of you, but in reality, even the information that I have is rather vague and inconclusive, Zai Lion said after a brief hesitation. What do you mean by that? Surely you know what's going on. Otherwise, why haven't you taken any action? Jin Chai asked as his expression darkened slightly. Please don't misunderstand, Brother Jin. While it's true that we haven't taken any action after we lost contact with the original sealed site, that's only because of a piece of information that we received from the site, Zai Lion replied with a wry smile. A smile appeared on Jin Chai's face upon hearing this. I knew all of the Grand Ascension stage fellow Taoists in the original sealed site would be able to send some information to the outside world somehow. Don't celebrate too early, Brother Jin. This piece of information is very vague, and was sent out by fellow Taoist Yuan Yan in a rushed manner using a rare secret technique. The message states that due to a sudden turn of events, the Stembor Queen was able to break through most of the restrictions in the ancient seal, and that it was somehow able to utilize a part of the seal's power to seal everyone in the original sealed site. However, the Stembor Queen is still restricted by the seal and unable to leave the area. Furthermore, it's expended a significant amount of its power and had to fall into hibernation again. The Stemborers that have appeared in our holy realm were contaminated by the Stembor Queen's aura, which it unintentionally released during its slumber, Zai Lion revealed. So you're saying that all of our fellow Taoists have been trapped in the ancient seal. Just how fearsome is this ancient seal to be able to trap so many grand ascension stage fellow Taoists with just a part of its power? Jin Chai exclaimed with an astonished expression. I don't know about that. All I know is that this is the only piece of information that was sent out of the original sealed site before all contact was cut off. It seems that the Stembor Queen must have done something to make even fellow Taoist Yuan Yan's secret technique ineffective before it went into hibernation, Zai Lion replied. I feel like you're hiding something, fellow Taoist Zai Lion. According to what you just said, wouldn't it have made more sense if sacred ancestors outside of the original sealed site like yourself had taken action right away? Why would you wait until a month from now to meet up? On top of that, this doesn't explain why we can't simultaneously reseal the Stembor Queen while also rescuing our brethren, Han Li countered. Zai Lion's expression darkened slightly upon hearing this. Do you know who was the first person to receive this information? Who was it? Could it be someone other than one of the sacred ancestors outside the original sealed site? Han Li asked. HMPH, it was none other than the person that you mistook me for earlier, Zai Lion harumphed coldly in response. You mean Bao Hua? Han Li was quite surprised to hear this. That's right, she was the one who received the information first, and it's most likely because Yuan Yan thinks only Bao Hua is capable of saving them, Zai Lion said with a dark expression. So you're saying it was Bao Hua who convinced all of you to wait until now, and that it was impossible to simultaneously stop the Stembor Queen while rescuing our brethren? Han Li mused as his brows furrowed slightly in a contemplative manner. Looks like you're quite familiar with that twin sister of mine, fellow Taoist Han. Indeed, she gathered all of us remaining sacred ancestors and displayed Yuan Yan's message to us for verification. Otherwise, we wouldn't have listened to her instructions, seeing as she isn't even one of the three patriarchs anymore. The final part of the message sent out by Yuan Yan was very ambiguous, and according to Bao Hua, it states that the Stembor Queen was somehow able to draw upon a part of the seal's power to trap everyone, but there's an effective period due to instability. The power of the seal will be at its weakest in several decades, but it's also when the restrictions of the original sealed site will be the most potent against the Stembor Queen. As such, that will be the perfect opportunity for us to reseal the Stembor Queen or rescue Yuan Yan and the others. As for why those objectives can't be simultaneously achieved, that's something that Bao Hua proposed. As soon as she received Yuan Yan's message, she had ventured into the original sealed site to investigate, and that was the conclusion she had arrived at. As for whether this conclusion is accurate or not, that'll be for all of you to judge when the time comes. However, all of us sacred ancestors think that it should be accurate. All of us have guarded the original sealed site at some point, and we're all very familiar with the ancient seal. Bao Hua does indeed possess incredible powers, but it's very unlikely that she'd be able to fool us in this aspect. On top of that, we can't think of any motive for Bao Hua to hatch a plot like this. After all, she's also a member of our holy realm, and she wouldn't just stand by idly and watch as our realm falls into peril, Zai Lion elaborated. Jin Chai and Shi Ding exchanged an astonished glance upon hearing this. It was clear that what Zai Lion had revealed was quite a surprise to them, and they needed some time to process this information. Meanwhile, Han Li pondered the situation for a moment before breaking the silence. If the information was provided by fellow Taoist Bao Hua, then it should be accurate. However, seeing as fellow Taoist Bao Hua was able to venture into the original sealed site, surely you and the other sacred ancestors would be able to do the same. If we could venture into the original sealed site to investigate, we would have naturally done so at all costs. However, Bao Hua's intrusion had already alerted the Stembor Queen. Even though the Stembor Queen is hibernating, the insect swarms surrounding the original sealed site became more than 10 times as fearsome. There are some extremely formidable Stemborers among them that even sacred ancestors wouldn't dare to engage in battle. As such, our hands are completely tied, Zai Lion said as a hint of fear surfaced in her eyes. There are stem borers too fearsome even for grand ascension stage beings. Are these the high-grade stem borers with body integration stage powers? Xianxia asked. Zai Lion immediately shook her head in response. No, it's another type of crimson stem borer that's no more than a foot in length. These stem borers have never appeared anywhere else in our holy realm, and they've only been seen around the original sealed site. Even in those areas, they're extremely rare. At the very most, there are only less than 2,000 of them in total. Xianxia's eyes widened with shock upon hearing this. Could it be that these stem borers possess grand ascension stage powers? Otherwise, how can they threaten you with such pitiful numbers? That's not the case. Judging from their auras alone, those stem borers are only at the spatial tempering stage, and they only possess two abilities. However, two abilities almost killed the two fellow Taoists who had previously tried to venture into the original sealed site, and none of us dared to try again, Zai Lion replied with a wry smile. Han Li's pupils contracted drastically upon hearing this. They almost killed two sacred ancestors with just two abilities. May I ask what those abilities are? It's very simple. One of them is instantaneous teleportation, while the other is self-detonation, Zai Lion replied. A hint of enlightenment appeared in Han Li's eyes upon hearing this, but he continued, there must be additional conditions attached to those abilities, right? Otherwise, they still wouldn't be able to pose such a major threat to grand ascension stage beings. Indeed, the instantaneous teleportation of those stem borers is unavoidable. As soon as they catch sight of you, they'll immediately appear right beside you, and no treasures or abilities can keep them out. On top of that, once they self-detonate, no abilities or treasures can protect the target, so the force of the explosion can only be withstood using one's physical body. What's most damning of all is that the force of the explosions is somehow able to contaminate our souls, thereby inflicting severe injuries on all of our clones as well. Some of our clones with less powerful souls may even perish on the spot in the face of those explosions. Zai Lion explained with a grim expression. Even the souls of your clones were affected. Xianxia was astonished to hear this, as was Han Li. I'm sure you know why these stem borers are so fearsome now. Even Bao Hua only managed to conduct a brief investigation before she was driven out by the swarms of stem borers. Zai Lion chuckled coldly. At this point, it was clear to everyone that Zai Lion and Bao Hua didn't seem to be on good terms with one another. Will you be able to find a way to counter these new stem borers during the meeting that's going to be held in a month? Han Li asked. You're a smart man, Brother Han. We chose to delay this operation to allow more powerful beings to arrive from other realms in order to bolster our forces, as well as to wait for Bao Hua to refine two types of special treasures that can counteract these self-detonating stem borers. According to Bao Hua, those two types of treasures will be able to nullify the explosions, Zai Lion replied. Chapter 22-21, Meeting. So fellow Taoist Bao Hua has already devised a plan. In that case, we should have some decent chances. How many beings from other realms will be able to arrive for the meeting? Xianxia asked. Aside from the Black Flame realm, all of the neighboring realms have sent more powerful beings into our holy realm. Even though the numbers are less than what was sent into our holy realm the first time, there are still over 40 in total. The most powerful realm among them, the Heavenly Crow realm, sent 9 grand ascension stage beings on this occasion, including even the legendary Old Man Copper Crow, Zai Lion replied. Xianxia immediately drew a sharp breath upon hearing this. Old Man Copper Crow, isn't he one of the vastly renowned 4 great birds? Even he's arrived in this realm. Looks like you've heard of him, Brother Jin. That makes sense, considering fellow Taoist Copper Crow is more renowned in the other realms than even the 3 patriarchs of our realm. However, it's said that he only came to our holy realm as one of the beings trapped in the original sealed site is an extremely important direct lineal descendant of his, so he had no choice but to come, Zai Lion replied. It's quite surprising that someone as powerful as Old Man Copper Crow would take such a risk for a mere descendant, Xianxia said as he rubbed his own bald head. Apparently, Old Man Copper Crow only has one direct lineal descendant, and he expended countless efforts and precious resources to nurture that descendant to the Grand Ascension stage, so he naturally couldn't just abandon that descendant, Zai Lion replied. I see. Come to think of it, if I had a Grand Ascension stage descendant, I'd also hold them in extremely high regard, Xianxia chuckled. Han Li pondered the situation in silence for a short while, then said, Brother Zai and I will definitely be attending this meeting. Please inform us when the time comes, fellow Taoist Zai Lion. Of course, Once the date arrives, I'll send a message to all three of you, Zai Lion replied without any hesitation. In that case, we'll be taking our leave now, Han Li said as he immediately rose to his feet. Taoist Zai and Silvermoon also stood up upon seeing this, clearly following Han Li's lead. Why are you in such a hurry, Brother Han? Our sky-facing peak produces a few types of special spirit fruits. Why not have some before you leave? Zai Lion said with a smile. There's no need for that. I'm sure there will be other opportunities in the future, Han Li said as he cupped his fist in a parting salute. He then swept a sleeve through the air, releasing a burst of golden light that enveloped all three of them before departing from the palace. Zai Lion didn't say anything further upon seeing this, but her brows furrowed ever so slightly. Haha, looks like this fellow Taoist Han has no intention of befriending a sacred ancestor like you. That's no surprise considering a battle has just taken place between your elder devil realm, the spirit realm, Jin Chai chortled. The relationship between our holy realm and the spirit realm is not for you to comment on, fellow Taoist Jin. Now that fellow Taoist Han has agreed to attend the meeting, what are your plans, Brother Jin? Zai Lion asked. We'll be attending as well, of course. However, we have no interest in living without a roof over our heads, so we'll have to stay here for some time, Jin Chai chuckled. Sure, I'd be honored to host you, and it's certainly fantastic news that you're willing to attend our meeting, Zai Lion said with a smile. The two men were quite pleased to hear this, and right at this moment, several female servants strode into the hall, carrying platters of spirit fruits and fragrant spirit tea. Meanwhile, Han Li and the others were flying through the air, and a short while later, they descended into a peaceful valley in the myriad flower mountain range. Han Li raised a hand to release several giant ape puppets, which quickly dug out a temporary cave abode. The trio entered the cave abode, then retired to their respective secret chambers to meditate. Prior to attending the meeting organized by the sacred ancestors, there was nothing that the three of them could do or discuss. Silvermoon was naturally still very concerned about Patriarch Ao Zio, but at the same time, she was also very relieved to hear that he had merely been trapped, not killed. A month was nothing more than the blink of an eye for cultivators like Han Li, and on this day, Han Li was meditating in his secret chamber when he suddenly opened his eyes before reaching out and making a grabbing motion with one hand. A translucent white jade shard was grabbed out of thin air, and he immediately rubbed his hands together, upon which the jade shard shattered, releasing a ball of green flames. Zai Lion's voice then rang out from within the flames. The date has arrived, Brother Han. Please come to the sky-facing peak so we can set off together. Han Li smiled upon hearing this, then snuffed out the flames before rising to his feet. Round half a day later, Han Li's trio arrived in a small secret palace within the palace on the sky-facing peak. Zai Lion, Jin Chai, Shi Ding, and two seductive women who appeared to be Zai Lion's disciples were already waiting for them there. At the center of the palace was a faint silver formation that was around 10 feet in size, and it was flashing with faint spiritual light. This formation can teleport us to the nearest city, and after that, it'll only take us half a month to get to the designated location, Zai Lion said. All right then, let's go, Jin Chai said as he strode into the formation with Shi Ding without any inhibitions. Faint spiritual light flashed, and the two of them disappeared. Han Li's trio also made their way into the formation, before being teleported away as well. Zai Lion and her two disciples brought up the rear, and were the last group to be teleported away. Round half a month later, the central region of a boundless yellow desert suddenly began to quake violently, following which an ancient earthy yellow city emerged from underground. The city was only several kilometers in size, but its walls were over 100 feet tall, and a series of armored warriors rushed onto the city walls amid bursts of dull drumming. These expressionless armored warriors were all puppets, and there were over 10,000 of them, all of which were wielding different types of weapons. At the center of the city stood a resplendent golden palace. The palace was extremely beautiful, looking as if it were constructed from pure gold, and not only was its surface riddled with all types of profound devilish patterns, there were also countless fist-sized gems of different colors embedded onto its roof, creating an extremely spectacular sight to behold. Shortly thereafter, a shrill cry suddenly rang out in the sky, and a pristine white beast-drawn carriage appeared in the distance amid a flash of white light. The carriage was over 100 feet in length and was very aesthetically pleasing. The entire carriage was completely translucent, and it was being drawn by 4 white worms. A man and a woman stood side by side on the beast-drawn carriage. The man looked to be in his 40s and was wearing a long white robe with faint light surging all over his body. As for the woman, she appeared to be in her 20s with a head of tall and voluminous hair and a set of beautiful facial features, wearing a suit of light blue armor. The carriage arrived in the air above the city after just a few flashes, following which the man made a hand seal, and the carriage and white worms immediately disappeared amid a flash of white light. The duo then transformed into streaks of white chi that vanished into the golden palace down below in a completely silent manner. Shortly thereafter, two streaks of light, one black and one silver, appeared in the distant sky in unison, covering a distance of close to 100 kilometers in just a few flashes before also flying into the palace. Around an hour later, a burst of rainbow light appeared in the sky in another direction, and a group of over 1,000 people emerged in the distance. The group was comprised evenly of men and women, with the men wearing suits of golden armor and wielding various types of weapons, while the women wore five-colored dresses and were playing different musical instruments. At the center of this group was a ball of rainbow light that was around an acre in size, and within the ball of light was a massive chair, upon which sat a tall figure in a set of long robes. The group arrived in the air above the city in an unhurried manner, following which the rainbow light descended toward the palace. During its descent, the rainbow light faded, revealing an authoritative elderly man wearing a rainbow robe with a crown on his head. The elderly man cast his gaze toward the palace before making his way toward it in an expressionless manner, while the armored men and instrument-playing women disintegrated into specks of spiritual light, as if they were mere illusions. Within the next few hours, more groups of different beings arrived at the city using different methods of transportation, and all of them made their way directly into the Golden Palace. Chapter 22:22 Old Man Copper Crow. All of a sudden, a massive dark green lotus flower that was around an acre in size appeared on the horizon, carrying Han Li, Zai Lion, Jin Chai, and the others. So this is the meeting venue. Fellow Taoist Huang Sha sure found a good place, Han Li said with a smile as he appraised the earthen city in the distance, and it was impossible to tell whether his words were meant to be insulting or full of praise. Zai Lion smiled and replied, Fellow Taoist Huang's boundless earth devilish arts make him the most powerful user of earth attribute cultivation arts in our entire holy realm. If the battlefield is within the desert, he can even contend with patriarchs like Bao Hua. On top of that, fellow Taoist Huang has always been very reclusive and doesn't share many close ties with anyone, so this is a good neutral location for the meeting to take place. I see, no wonder this was selected as the meeting venue. That earthen city is nothing more than a normal spirit treasure, but those puppets are quite remarkable. There are over 10,000 of them in total, and each one possesses spatial tempering stage powers, Jin Chai said with a hint of amazement in his eyes as he appraised the armored puppets in the distance. Fellow Taoist Huang's boundless earth divine guards were invented by him, and both their refinement and manipulation requires the boundless earth devilish arts as a basis. However, these guards can only display their true power here. Once they leave the sand, their powers will be severely diminished. Having said that, they're very useful in places like this where there's a great abundance of earth attribute origin chi, as they'll be able to recover even from severe damage. Even for grand ascension stage beings like ourselves, it would be quite difficult to eradicate so many of these puppets here, Zai Lion explained. That's true, opponents with near-indestructible bodies are always very troublesome to face, Jin Chai agreed with a nod. While they were speaking, the giant lotus flower had already taken them directly above the earthen city before slowly descending. As soon as it landed on the ground, Han Li cast his gaze toward the shimmering golden palace gate, upon which a hint of surprise flashed through his eyes. Even his enormous spiritual sense was unable to infiltrate this golden palace. It was clear that this was quite an extraordinary treasure, and most likely one that Huang Sha held in very high regard. Zai Lion made her way toward the palace gate with her two female disciples, and Han Li's trio quickly followed along. However, Jin Chai, who had appeared quite reckless and bullish, was rather hesitant as he appraised the palace up ahead. Right at this moment, Shi Ding made his way toward the palace in an expressionless manner, and Jin Chai could only follow along with a wry smile. As soon as Han Li stepped into the palace, restriction fluctuations erupted from underfoot, and a burst of azure light rose up from the ground, instantly enveloping his trio. Silvermoon was quite alarmed by this, and she immediately prepared to unleash some type of attack to ward off the restriction, but Han Li's gentle voice then suddenly sounded beside her ears. "There's no need to be alarmed. This restriction bears no ill will." Silvermoon's heart immediately eased upon hearing this, and as the azure light surged around them, the surrounding area blurred before the three of them vanished in unison. In the next instant, an azure light formation appeared in a resplendent hall, and Han Li's trio re-emerged. Dozens of pairs of eyes immediately fell upon Han Li's trio like sharp daggers, following which a few surprised voice rang out. It's a human cultivator. Isn't that the golden crab from the devilish origin sea?" Han Li paid no heed to these voices and calmly inspected his surroundings. In doing so, he discovered that the three of them were currently situated at the center of the hall, with over 100 figures of different heights and sizes split up into over 30 groups around them. Close to half of these people were seated on chairs, while the others were standing respectfully off to the side. Zai Lion had already made her way over to a corner of the hall and taken a seat, while her two female disciples stood behind her. "Please take a seat, fellow Taoist Han brother Zai," Zai Lion said with a smile. Han Li nodded in response, then made his way over to another corner of the hall with Taoist Zai and Silvermoon before taking a seat as well. As soon as he sat down, several bursts of spiritual sense immediately swept over his body without any inhibition. Han Li's expression darkened upon sensing this, and he gave a cold harumph. His voice wasn't very loud, but it exploded like rumbling thunderclaps within the ears of the owners of those bursts of spiritual sense, shaking them directly to their souls. All of them hurriedly withdrew their spiritual sense and didn't dare to test Han Li any further. A hint of surprise flashed through the eyes of the other Grand Ascension stage beings present upon seeing this. They also began to regard Han Li with a bit more respect. Right at this moment, Jin Chai and Shi Ding also appeared within the hall, and they looked around before their eyes settled upon Han Li, whom they made their way toward before taking a seat in a pair of vacant chairs nearby. Thus, more and more Grand Ascension stage beings were teleported into the hall, and they were either alone or arrived with other Grand Ascension stage beings, or were accompanied by entourages of disciples and servants. Several hours later, close to half of the vacant seats had been filled. During this time, all of the Grand Ascension stage beings present were either meditating in their chairs or appraising the other Grand Ascension stage beings around them, but none of them said anything. Han Li was currently inspecting the other Grand Ascension stage beings in the hall. All of the beings present were from alternate realms, and their appearances and auras were all extremely peculiar. Aside from Zai Lion, there were 6 other Grand Ascension stage beings that were releasing powerful devilish qi, and these were clearly sacred ancestors as well. However, Bao Hua wasn't among them, so it seemed that she hadn't arrived yet. As Han Li cast his gaze around the hall, he took notice of a yellow-haired elderly man meditating in his chair. The elderly man's features were very ordinary, and he was wearing a gray robe, while a halo of earthy yellow mist slowly revolved around him, indicating exemplary control over Earth attribute origin qi. This man was clearly the owner of this place, the sacred ancestor by the name of Xianxia. As expected, he really had cultivated Earth attribute devilish arts to an extreme level. Han Li's eyes were slightly narrowed as he appraised Xianxia, and it was impossible to tell what he was thinking. A short while later, another light formation suddenly appeared in the hall, and 9 figures emerged at once, all of whom were Grand Ascension stage beings. Such a large group of Grand Ascension stage beings naturally created quite a stir in the hall, and many people, including Han Li, immediately cast their eyes toward the group. The group was comprised of beings of both genders and various ages, and all of them wore suits of armor of different colors. What was quite remarkable was that these suits of armor looked as if they had been constructed from countless interwoven feathers. Among these Grand Ascension stage beings, 8 of them were standing on the outskirts of the light formation, while an elderly man stood at the very center. The elderly man's aura didn't seem to be all that powerful compared to everyone else's, but as he cast his cold gaze around the hall, everyone who met his gaze was struck by a bone-chilling sensation, as if their soul had been frozen solid. A hint of fear immediately surfaced in the eyes of those Grand Ascension stage beings, and someone exclaimed, "Old Man Copper Crow," in a hushed voice. The group of 9 Grand Ascension stage beings made their way to a corner of the hall before taking up all of the vacant seats there. Following the arrival of these 9 Grand Ascension stage beings, a few more people arrived, and it was clear that everyone was already here, but Bao Hua was still nowhere to be seen. However, all of the Grand Ascension stage beings present had cultivated for countless years, so they certainly weren't going to become impatient from waiting for such a short time. Shortly thereafter, the light formation reappeared in the hall, and the duo of Bao Hua and Hai emerged. Hai's aura had become quite powerful, clearly indicating a drastic improvement in his cultivation base, and Bao Hua was also looking as vibrant as ever, clearly having recovered from her injuries. As soon as Bao Hua appeared, Xianxia immediately opened his eyes as a smile appeared on his face. "You're finally here, fellow Taoist Bao Hua. Thank you for providing this venue for our meeting, fellow Taoist Huang," Bao Hua replied in a calm manner, but a hint of surprise flashed through her eyes as she caught sight of Han Li. It was clear that she hadn't expected Han Li to become a Grand Ascension cultivator in such a short time. "No need to thank me. It's my honor to be hosting so many fellow Taoists at once. Now that you're here, I'll allow you to oversee the proceedings," Xianxia replied. "Please forgive me for my tardiness, fellow Taoists. I can see that all of you have arrived as promised, and that gives me a lot of confidence going forward," Bao Hua said with a faint smile. Chapter 22-23, Starfall Flag and Faux Illusion Sky Mirror. Skip all the pleasantries, Bao Hua. Tell us if you've managed to refine the treasures required to ward off the stemborer's explosions. Some of us have had to provide many precious materials to you for the sake of those treasures. The one who had spoken was a man that was entirely enshrouded in golden light, and he seemed to be quite familiar with Bao Hua. "Greetings, fellow Taoist Li Miao. Rest assured, I wouldn't have accepted those materials if I wasn't confident in my ability to refine the treasures. Please take a look." Bao Hua raised a slender hand as she spoke, and two balls of light, one black and one white, emerged from her palm. At the centers of those balls of light were a flag that was emblazoned with countless silver stars, and a mirror containing a winged white tiger image, respectively. "These two treasures can counter those self-detonating stemborers. They don't look all that special," another being enshrouded in green chi said in a skeptical voice. A middle-aged man dressed like a king interjected, "He, I'm afraid you're wrong there, fellow Taoist Lu Shi. These two treasures appear quite ordinary, but they seem to be related to the legendary profound heavenly treasures, Star Moon Flag and Illusion Sky Mirror. Could it be that these are replicas of those two treasures?" A stir immediately rang through the hall, and many people began to reassess the treasures Bao Hua was displaying with stunned expressions. Bao Hua nodded calmly in response. "These two treasures are indeed replicas of the Star Moon Flag and Illusion Sky Mirror. I refer to them as Starfall Flag and Faux Illusion Sky Mirror. I've heard that the Star Moon Flag is one of very few treasures that can draw upon the power of stars, while the Illusion Sky Mirror possesses the unmatched ability to conceal the entire heavens. Do those two treasures of yours possess some of those abilities, fellow Taoist Bao Hua?" Another voice suddenly rang out in the hall, but strangely enough, no one could pinpoint where the voice was coming from. "You must be a fellow Taoist from the Black Knight realm, right? As expected of someone cultivating darkness attribute abilities, your concealment skills are truly unmatched. To answer your question, the Starfall Flag and Faux Illusion Sky Mirror will only be around 50% as potent as the treasures they're replicating at most, but according to my estimates, that should be enough to deal with the self-detonating stemborers," Bao Hua replied with a smile. The Grand Ascension stage being from the Black Knight realm was silent for a moment before continuing. "Seeing as you're so confident in these two treasures, I'm sure they'll work just fine. Now that the issue of the self-detonating stemborers has been resolved, I think we should devise a plan for how to restrict the stemborer queen once we enter the original sealed site. Of course, even though quite a large number of us have gathered here, we'll still be vulnerable to the stemborer queen unless we can work out an effective course of action," Bao Hua replied with a nod. The Grand Ascension stage being by the name of Li Miao asked, "Just how fearsome is that stemborer queen? Far more fellow Taoists entered the original sealed site than the numbers we've gathered here, yet all of them were still trapped by the stemborer queen. Fellow Taoist Bao Hua, you're the last person to have entered the original sealed site. Would you be able to provide us with some useful information?" Bao Hua was unsurprised by Li Miao's inquiry, and she said, "I'm sure many of you want to see the message I received from fellow Taoist Yuan Yan, right? In that case, I'll display the message to all of you to assuage your suspicions." She swept a sleeve through the air as she spoke to release an inky black bead, which began to rotate rapidly in midair. Countless five-colored runes surged forth from the bead, then converged to form an incomplete passage of text. Everyone immediately cast their eyes toward the passage of text. Sure enough, the message was exactly as Bao Hua had described. It had been sent out by Yuan Yan, and it briefly described the conundrum that everyone in the original sealed site encountered, followed by a request for reinforcements. The last part of the message was quite blurry and indistinct, but upon closer inspection and analysis, those did indeed appear to be words of warning. Different expressions appeared on everyone's face after viewing the message. Looks like the information provided by fellow Taoist Bao Hua was accurate. Let's begin discussing strategies now, a young beauty proposed. How are we going to do that? There are over 40 of us here, and each of us is going to propose a different course of action. If you ask me, fellow Taoist Bao Hua is the one who proposed this meeting, and she's one of the most powerful beings among us, so we should hear her opinion first, someone countered. A middle-aged Grand Ascension stage being from the Heavenly Crow realm immediately objected. Why should fellow Taoist Bao Hua get to speak first when our Heavenly Crow realm has the most representatives? At the same time, Old Man Copper Crow abruptly opened his eyes to reveal a cold expression, and all of the other Grand Ascension stage beings immediately fell silent. Bao Hua cast her gaze toward Old Man Copper Crow and said, "I've heard much about you, fellow Taoist Copper Crow. Do you have any proposals for how we should proceed? I'm only here to save my descendant. As for those self-detonating stem borers and that stem borer queen, I won't pay them any heed as long as they don't get in my way." Old Man Copper Crow replied in an expressionless manner. His statement immediately created quite a stir in the hall, and Bao Hua didn't seem to be very surprised to hear this, but her brows furrowed slightly as she said, "Is that really appropriate, Brother Copper Crow?" Old Man Copper Crow harumphed coldly in response. "HMPH, why not? I only have one direct lineal descendant, and I expended countless efforts to nurture him into a Grand Ascension stage being, yet he's been trapped while assisting your Elder Devil realm. I don't care if that Stembor Queen really does possess the ability to destroy entire realms. As long as it doesn't come to our Heavenly Crow realm, it can do whatever it wants as far as I'm concerned." Everyone's expressions darkened slightly upon hearing this. The Grand Ascension stage being by the name of Lu Shi said with furrowed brows, "Aren't you being too selfish, fellow Taoist?" "Selfish? So what? I've always been this way. Are you going to teach me a lesson?" Old Man Copper Crow countered as he cast a cold gaze toward Lu Shi. As soon as their eyes met, Lu Shi couldn't help but shudder, and he felt as if all of his internal organs had been instantly frozen. His expression darkened significantly, but he decided to remain silent in the end. The other Grand Ascension stage beings didn't dare to interject, but most of them were also quite displeased. However, there were a few Grand Ascension stage beings that had come to the Elder Devil realm for the same objective as Old Man Copper Crow, and they were quite elated by this turn of events. With the vastly renowned Old Man Copper Crow leading the way, their plight to save their brethren would undoubtedly encounter far less resistance. Han Li was taking advantage of this opportunity to inspect Old Man Copper Crow. From the beginning, he had immediately sensed that this Old Man Copper Crow's spiritual sense was far more powerful than that of the average Grand Ascension stage being. He was perhaps even superior in this regard to the likes of the three devilish patriarchs. Of course, he still couldn't compare with Han Li, who had encountered many miraculous opportunities and cultivated multiple spiritual sense secret techniques, thereby elevating his spiritual sense to become several times as powerful as that of the average Grand Ascension stage being. Even so, this was already a testament to just how fearsome Old Man Copper Crow was compared to the average Grand Ascension stage being, and it seemed that his status as one of the four great birds wasn't unfounded. "Fellow Taoist Copper Crow, we all understand your urge to save your descendant, but don't let your emotions get the better of yourself. I never said that the two objectives couldn't be simultaneously achieved," Bao Hua said in a calm manner. She was the only one present who could speak on equal terms with Old Man Copper Crow. Old Man Copper Crow faltered slightly upon hearing this before turning to Bao Hua with a cold expression. "What do you mean by that? You're not trying to trick me, are you? Letter 1D453, letter 1D4C7, letter 1D626, letter 212F, letter 1D638, letter 1D626, letter 1D450, letter 1D45C, letter 1D4C2. I wouldn't dare to do that. You think far too highly of me, fellow Taoist," Bao Hua chuckled. "HMPH, I wouldn't be so sure of that. Everyone knows that you were always the most wily and cunning of the three devilish patriarchs." Old Man Copper Crow chuckled coldly. Bao Hua's brows furrowed slightly upon hearing this, but a smile then suddenly appeared on her face as she began to communicate directly with Old Man Copper Crow through voice transmission. Initially, Old Man Copper Crow maintained his cold expression, but moments later, his pupils suddenly contracted drastically and he asked, "Is that true? If you're lying to me, take a look at this and you'll be able to see whether I'm telling the truth." Bao raised a hand as she spoke, releasing a streak of light that landed in Old Man Copper Crow's grasp in a flash. Chapter 22-24, Ancient Seal. Old Man Copper Crow parted his fingers to reveal a translucent crimson feather that looked as if it had been carved out of crystal. He stared at the feather for a short while with a hesitant expression, then suddenly tossed it back to Bao before taking a deep breath. "I didn't think that you would be fortunate enough to meet that senior, Bao. In that case, I'll place my trust in you just this once. Tell us your plan." "Thank you, fellow Taoist. I'd be more than happy to share my plan. Does anyone else have any objections?" Bao asked with a smile. "We would all like to hear your plan, fellow Taoist Bao." "Indeed, I'm sure that a plan proposed by fellow Taoist Bao would be a reliable one." The other Grand Ascension stage beings were quite relieved to see that Old Man Copper Crow was willing to compromise, and they were all eager to hear what Bao had to say. "Thank you for your kind words, everyone. Truth be told, I ventured into the original sealed site on a second occasion around half a year ago." All of the Grand Ascension stage beings present were stunned to hear this. "What, you ventured into the original sealed site again? How is that possible? How did you do that?" Not only were the foreign Grand Ascension stage beings astonished by this revelation, even the sacred ancestors present were completely dumbstruck, having clearly not heard about this in advance. "There's no need to be alarmed, fellow Taoists. I was able to do this as I've cultivated several profound concealment abilities, and also because I had the faux illusion sky mirror to assist me. Using that treasure, I was able to avoid alerting those stemborers, and once I entered the original sealed site, I discovered that some new developments had transpired, and those developments convinced me that it was possible to achieve both objectives simultaneously," Bao explained. "What did you see that made you change your mind, fellow Taoist Bao?" A Grand Ascension stage being couldn't help but ask. "Due to the power of the seal, I was unable to venture deep into the original sealed site and could only inspect the site from the outskirts. During my inspection, though, I discovered that some changes seem to have taken place in the ancient seal," Bao revealed. "What are those changes, fellow Taoist?" Another Grand Ascension stage being asked with a serious expression. "There's no need to be concerned. In a sense, these changes are a good thing. What I discovered was that the ancient seal seems to be in the process of repairing itself. Even though the process is extremely slow, the ancient seal is definitely more powerful than it was on the last occasion I ventured into the original sealed site, and it seems that seal possesses some level of sentience," Bao replied with a smile. All of the Grand Ascension stage beings present couldn't help but exchange bewildered glances upon hearing this. "I'm sure your appraisal is accurate, fellow Taoist Bao, but didn't you say that the power of the seal has already been controlled by the Stemborer Queen? How is it a good thing that the seal has become more powerful?" It was Jin Chai posing the question on this occasion. "It seems that there's been a misunderstanding. The portion of the seal's power that has been enhanced is the portion still under the seal's control, not the portion that has been controlled by the Stemborer Queen. Even though this enhancement is quite insignificant compared to the overall power of the ancient seal, it's still something that we can take advantage of," Bao replied. "So how does that make it possible to achieve both objectives simultaneously? Hurry up and tell us your plan," Old Man Copper Crow said in an impatient manner. "It's not my intention to waste anyone's time. I simply want to provide some background information so everyone can understand my plan," Bao replied. "Fine, keep going then," Old Man Copper Crow prompted in a disgruntled manner. Bao smiled as she continued. "During my last trip into the original sealed site, I discovered that the Stemborer Queen is situated in a different part of the seal from the place where our fellow Taoists have been trapped. Regardless of which side we enter, it'll inevitably alert the Stemborer Queen. So my original plan was for everyone to combine their powers to reseal the Stemborer Queen, then save fellow Taoist Yuan Yan and the others. Of course, doing so could enrage the Stemborer Queen, prompting it to use the power of the seal under its control to lash out at our trapped fellow Taoists. If that were to happen, fellow Taoist Yuan Yan and the others could be plunged into grave peril. However, after discovering that the ancient seal possesses a certain level of sentience, I theorized that it could be possible to help the ancient seal regain control over the portion of its power currently under the Stembora Queen's control. If we can do that, not only will we be able to free our trapped fellow Taoists, the Stembora Queen will have to face the complete power of the ancient seal, and we may not even have to expend that much power to reseal the Stembora Queen. All of the Grand Ascension stage beings in the hall displayed different reactions upon hearing this, and Han Li was also stroking his own chin in a contemplative manner. Right at this moment, Old Man Copper Crow suddenly broke the silence. Your plan seems to be quite feasible, but I have a question, fellow Taoist Bao Hua. Go ahead, fellow Taoist, Bao Hua prompted with a smile. Even if the ancient seal really is sentient, how confident are you that we can make it work with us? Without the assistance of the ancient seal, there would be no way we can recover the portion of the seal's power under the Stembora Queen's control. Even the true immortals were unable to kill the Stembora Queen. If your plan were to go awry, we could be plunged into severe peril. If we get trapped in the original sealed site as well, the other realms most likely won't be sending any more reinforcements, Old Man Copper Crow said. Rest assured, Brother Copper Crow, I have a way to communicate with the ancient seal, which is why I hatched this plan in the first place. Back when I was one of the devilish patriarchs, I had once guarded the original sealed site for tens of thousands of years. In terms of understanding of the ancient seal, even Yuan Yan and Naipan can't compare with me, Bao Hua replied in a confident manner. I trust in your judgment, fellow Taoist Bao Hua. I'm just here to save my descendant, and your plan doesn't conflict with that goal, so I have no objections, Old Man Copper Crow said with a smile. Bao Hua nodded before turning to the other Grand Ascension stage beings present. Does anyone else have any questions? If not, let's move on to the more specific details. I already have a rough plan, but I'll need everyone's help to flesh it out. A burst of hushed chatter rang out within the hall, and a few Grand Ascension stage beings raised some questions about the ancient seal, all of which were answered by Bao Hua in a calm manner. Letter 1D627, letter 1D4C7, letter 212F, letter 1D452, letter 1D4CC, letter 1D452, letter 1D4B8, letter 2134, letter 1D4C2. It was clear that Bao Hua had thought long and hard about this plan, and everyone was very pleased to see this. Thus, everyone began to discuss the specific details of the plan. The plan was ultimately finalized after a day and a night of debate and negotiation, and it was decided that everyone would set off in around half a month. After that, the meeting concluded, and countless streaks of light flew out of the Golden Palace before quickly vanishing into the distance. Han Li's trio had also departed from the palace, and he was searching for a mountain in the desert to stay in. However, shortly after departing from the Earthen City, Han Li's expression suddenly changed slightly, and he stopped in midair before casting his gaze off to the side. Come on out, fellow Taoist Bao Hua. Why are you hiding and sneaking around like this? Silvermoon's heart jolted upon hearing this, while Taoist's eyes stopped behind Han Li in an expressionless manner. A pleasant voice rang out from the direction that Han Li was casting his gaze toward. I didn't think that you would progress to the Grand Ascension stage in such a short time, fellow Taoist Han. On top of that, I can sense that you're already far more powerful than the average Grand Ascension stage being. Looks like Yuan Yan was right to be wary of you. As soon as the voice trailed off, spatial fluctuations erupted, and a massive pink flower projection appeared alongside Bao Hua and Hai. Bao Hua was currently appraising Han Li with a calm, yet intrigued expression. Why have you come to see me? Are you regretting your decision from last time? Han Li asked. Perhaps, but if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't have been able to recover so quickly. On top of that, with your inclusion in this operation, I'm even more confident that we'll succeed, Bao Hua said with a smile. Surely you jest, fellow Taoist Bao Hua. I'm just a rookie Grand Ascension stage being. How will I possibly be of any significance? Did you stop me just to tease me? Han Li asked as he appraised Bao Hua with a meaningful gaze. Chapter 22-25, Setting Off. Why are you being so cold, fellow Taoist Han? We've met on multiple occasions, so we're already acquaintances, are we not? I came to see you because I want to make another deal with you. Are you interested? Bao Hua asked with a smile. Another deal? Sure, go ahead, Han Li prompted in a calm manner. Bao Hua took a glance at Taoist Zai and Silvermoon, then suggested, how about we speak in private? All right, Han Li agreed, then turned and said something to Silvermoon and Taoist Zai in a low voice before flying with Bao Hua toward a certain direction. Moments later, Bao Hua and Han Li were situated on a small sand dune with only around 50 feet separating the two of them. Bao Hua gently pointed her finger into the air a few times, and several pink threads instantly shot forth before vanishing in a flash. Letter 1D65B, letter 1D4FB, letter 1D486, letter 1D486, letter 1D498, letter 1D65A, letter 1D658, letter 1D664, letter 1D662. The entire area around the sand dune was instantly enshrouded under an invisible restriction. "All right, let's hear what you have to say," Han Li prompted. "Why are you in such a hurry, fellow Taoist Han? I obtained some rare sandalwood fruits not too long ago. Why don't we sample them together? Please take a seat," Bao Hua said with a smile, then swept a sleeve toward the ground, upon which countless grains of sand rose up before manifesting 2 stone chairs and a stone table that was several tens of feet in length. A burst of pink light swept forth, and a pair of purple spirit fruits, a flagon of spirit wine, and 2 translucent jade cups appeared on the table. Han Li swept his spiritual sense toward the spirit fruits on the table, and his expression changed ever so slightly. After a brief moment of hesitation, he took a seat on one of the stone chairs. Bao Hua sat down across from him, and only after they had sampled the spirit fruits and spirit wine did Bao Hua finally cut to the chase. "The deal I want to make with you is very simple. I want you to keep someone occupied at a set time in the near future, so I can do something that I've been plotting for a very long time." "Don't you think you should be more specific, fellow Taoist Bao Hua? Someone that even you're wary of must be very powerful," Han Li said with a faint smile. "Indeed, truth be told, even I don't want to face that person directly in battle. However, I'm only asking you to stall them for a while, not to engage in a battle of life and death. I'm sure that's not too difficult. If you can do this for me, I'll owe you a massive favor, and if you have any use for me in the future, I definitely won't refuse. What do you think, Brother Han?" Bao Hua asked. "A favor from you is naturally quite tempting, but you have to tell me who it is that you're referring to," Han Li replied. "This is not actually someone that you're unfamiliar with. It's—" Bao Hua's voice trailed off there, and she communicated the name of the target to Han Li through voice transmission. Han Li's brows immediately furrowed as he said, "Are you making a joke? How can a rookie Grand Ascension stage being like me possibly complete such a difficult task? Don't be so quick to refuse me, Brother Han. Why don't you take a look at this first?" Bao Hua said with a smile before raising a hand to release a ball of white light, which reached Han Li in a flash. It was a palm-sized jade vial. Han Li caught the vial before inspecting it through narrowed eyes, and instead of immediately opening the vial, he asked, "What is the meaning of this, fellow Taoist Bao Hua?" "In addition to a favor, I'll also offer this in exchange for your assistance," Bao Hua replied. Han Li gave a cold harumph as he opened the vial and inspected its contents with his spiritual sense, upon which his expression immediately changed drastically. "This is a divine glue pill." A hint of surprise also flashed through Bao Hua's eyes. "You're certainly quite knowledgeable, fellow Taoist Han. I didn't think you'd be able to recognize this pill right away. This is one of very few types of pills that can nourish even a Grand Ascension stage being's soul, and it's particularly effective for those who have only recently reached the Grand Ascension stage. The refinement method for this pill has already gone missing many years ago. How did you manage to obtain this?" Han Li asked. "I came across it by chance in the cave abode of an ancient cultivator. At the time, I obtained 7 of these pills in total, but after so many years, only 1 remains. Is this enough to show you my sincerity, fellow Taoist Han?" Bao Hua asked. "It looks like you're determined to recruit me. Do you really think I'll be able to stall that person? Aren't you worried that your plan will fail due to a failure on my part?" Han Li asked. To be honest, prior to this meeting, I had intended to approach someone else for this role. However, even though that fellow Taoist is quite powerful, there's less than a 50% chance that he'd actually be able to stall that person. In contrast, you're a completely different story. Even prior to reaching the Grand Ascension stage, you could already contend with Grand Ascension stage beings. Now that you've reached the Grand Ascension stage yourself, you've undoubtedly become even more powerful. In a serious battle, perhaps even I won't be a match for you. This plan is of the utmost importance to me, so if I'm going to find an ally, I have to find the most reliable one. Even if it costs me a little extra, I'm willing to pay the price," Bao Hua said with a faint smile. "Seeing as you think so highly of me, it would be unbecoming of me to continue to refuse. All right, I can help you just this once, but aside from this pill and the favor you promised me, I have another condition. If you can agree to that condition as well, I guarantee that I'll be able to stall that person for a day and a night so you have enough time to do what you want to do," Han Li replied. Bao Hua's smile faded, and a serious look appeared on her face upon hearing this. "Oh, go ahead, fellow Taoist Han. If you're ever in a position where you're ruling over the Elder Devil realm again, I want you to promise that your realm will never invade our spirit realm for as long as you live," Han Li said. "That's out of the question. Don't you think that's going too far, fellow Taoist Han?" Bao Hua was rather displeased to hear this. "I don't know what your exact plan is, but seeing as you're willing to pay such a heavy price, this must be an extremely rare opportunity for you. On top of that, I don't think there's anyone else in the Elder Devil realm that can help you. Who else will you turn to?" Old Man Copper Crow, setting aside whether he'd be willing to take the risk, "The price you'll have to pay for his services will definitely be significantly higher than what you promised me. After all, not everyone would be willing to make such a powerful enemy for themselves so easily," Han Li replied in a calm manner. "HMPH, aren't you afraid of turning that person against you?" Bao Hua asked in a cold voice. "Why ask a question you already know the answer to, fellow Taoist Bao Hua? That person is already an enemy of mine, so what does it matter if our relationship deteriorates even further?" Han Li replied with a nonchalant smile. Bao Hua was silent for a long while before finally conceding. "That's true, but I definitely can't promise you that I'll cancel the sacred sacrifice during the merging of our two realms. All I can guarantee is that, for as long as I live, none of my brethren will encroach upon the territory of your human race during future sacred sacrifices. You'll have to include the demon race as well. Our human race has always shared close ties with the demon race. If the demon race were to be attacked, our human race can't just stand by and watch," Han Li said. "All right, I can agree to this condition if it's only limited to the human and demon races," Bao Hua agreed. "Good, I'll be taking this pill. Let's swear our inner demon vows, then discuss the specific details of the plan," Han Li said with a smile. Bao Hua naturally had no objections to this. Around 2 hours later, Han Li's trio departed, then landed on a sand dune on the edge of the desert around half a day later. 10 days later, tens of thousands of high-grade devilish beings had gathered above the earthen city, all of whom were at the spatial tempering stage or above. Han Li and all of the other Grand Ascension stage beings were also among these devilish beings, as well as hundreds of giant devilish arcs that were hovering in midair. A short while later, a command was issued, and the tens of thousands of devilish beings surged toward a certain direction with the flying arcs. 3 months later, countless armored devilish warriors had filled an entire barren valley, and the sound of rumbling war drums erupted into the heavens. Millions of devilish warriors had gathered here, and they were either standing on flying treasures or atop clouds of devilish chi. At the center of this devilish army was a giant devilish arc that resembled a small island, and Han Li and the other Grand Ascension stage beings were gathered in a hall on the arc, listening to an address from Bao Hua. "I'll split the armored warriors outside into several groups to attack the area around the original sealed site, attracting as much of the insect swarms as possible. After that, we'll make a direct charge for the original sealed site under the protection of these tens of thousands of elite warriors. Once we enter the original sealed site, we'll be able to make use of the restrictions in there to temporarily keep out the stem borers, and after that, we'll be able to enact our plan." Chapter 22-26, Fierce Battle Against the Insect Swarms 1. Prior to setting off, the plan had already been confirmed, so none of the Grand Ascension stage beings had any objections. Moments later, the devilish army split up into several groups that charged toward the same direction, leaving only the tens of thousands of elite devilish guards and the Grand Ascension stage beings behind. A few hours later, the remaining elite devilish warriors also departed from the valley on a giant arc. 7 days later, an army comprised of over 100,000 devilish warriors was locked in a fierce battle against a swarm of stemborers above a barren plateau. The devilish army was very organized and was arranged in a profound circular formation with the several hundred giant arcs positioned at strategic locations. Furthermore, multiple layers of protective light barriers had been set up, and thick pillars of light were being blasted out of the light barriers in a frenzy, felling large swathes of stemborers. However, there were simply far too many stemborers in this swarm. No matter how many were killed, more would immediately take their place to continue to attack the formation. The devilish army had been slowly advancing in the past, but it had been forced to a standstill. Fortunately, the attacks being unleashed by the formation were becoming more and more powerful, killing countless stemborers and alleviating some of the pressure on the army. However, the three-body integration stage devilish being standing on the giant arc at the center of the formation weren't pleased at all to see this. It's not a wise decision to use our backup power so soon. We won't be able to stall the Stemborer swarm for long now, a crimson-armored devilish man said. HMPH, if we hadn't used that power, the entire formation could have crumbled just now. If our formation gets overwhelmed, then we won't be able to stall the Stemborer swarm at all. A thin, elderly devilish man harumphed coldly in response. But the sacred ancestors ordered us to hold our own for at least half a day, yet only a few hours have passed. If we want to ensure our survival, we'll have to work out a plan. Otherwise, once everyone's exhausted, the three of us alone won't be able to fight our way out of this swarm, the crimson-armored man countered. Don't make me repeat myself. If we hadn't used this power, we would have already been overwhelmed. If worse comes to worst, we'll just have to unleash secret techniques to tap into our latent potential, and there's still a decent chance that we'll be able to escape, the elderly man replied in a nonchalant manner. You sure make it sound simple. If anything goes even slightly wrong, all of us could be devoured by these Stemborers, the crimson-armored man said in a cold voice. I don't think that's a valid concern as long as we work out a good plan and take the right opportunities, the elderly man countered with a roll of his eyes. The crimson-armored man immediately flared up with rage, and he was just about to say something when the final devilish lord, a middle-aged woman, interjected. I can't believe you two are still bickering at a time like this. If you want to argue, you can save it for after we escape from this place. Prior to that, we have to combine our efforts and help one another. Now that we've already sent out our backup forces, it's too late to regret our decision. Let's think about whether there are any available courses of action other than burning through our latent potential. The crimson-armored man forcibly repressed his displeasure and put on a smile as he said, You're right, Mistress Tian Miao. We should work together to devise a strategy first. The elderly man's expression also eased slightly as he said, I didn't think that these Stemborers would be so much more powerful than other devilish insects. It's indeed imperative for us to work together now. Thus, the three devilish lords began to devise a plan for escape. Meanwhile, the other devilish armies were also trapped within Stemborer swarms elsewhere, and they could only attack the Stemborers with all their might as they held on for dear life. Due to the fact that most of the Stemborers around the original sealed site had been diverted away by the devilish armies, all of the Grand Ascension stage beings, and the tens of thousands of elite devilish warriors were able to quickly tear through around a dozen insect swarms, and they were now quite close to the original sealed site. However, at this point, the other Stemborers had realized what was happening, and they were finally surrounded by a boundless sea of Stemborers, just like the other devilish armies. None of the Grand Ascension stage beings had stepped in yet, but the tens of thousands of elite devilish warriors and all of the disciples of the Grand Ascension stage beings were more than equipped to deal with the Stemborer swarm. Countless streaks of light surged through the air, felling large swathes of Stemborers with ease. The entire group continued onward at an astonishing speed. Only the more powerful Stemborers could stand in their way, and even they were instantly shredded by the ferocious barrage of attacks. No more than 7 minutes later, the group had advanced hundreds of thousands of kilometers, killing countless Stemborers in the process. All of a sudden, a burst of strange hissing rang out up ahead, and the Stemborers parted to reveal a group of giant green insects. Letter 1D6ATF, letter 1D5FF, letter 1D5F2, letter 1D4, 1E, letter 1D6A0, letter 1D556, letter 1D6AC, letter 1D5FC, letter 1D5FA. These giant insects were each over 100 feet in size with sharp pincers and menacing fangs, presenting a very intimidating sight to behold. A high-grade devilish being immediately issued a warning at the sight of these insects. Look out! Those are high-grade Stemborers, and their breaths are equal in power to a full-force attack from a body integration stage being. Right at this moment, all of the giant insects opened their mouths to let loose pillars of green light. Thousands of elite devilish warriors were caught off guard, and their defenses were penetrated by the pillars of light, which instantly vaporized them amid howls of anguish. These pillars of light were so powerful that the devilish warriors were completely powerless to withstand them. Haha, it looks like the Stemborers finally understand that we're the main forces they have to deal with. Otherwise, they wouldn't have deployed so many high-grade Stemborers at once. Let's not sit around any longer. A black-armored sacred ancestor, standing at the front of the giant arc, chortled as he raised a hand to release a plume of black threads, which transformed into a net that was several kilometers in area before descending toward the massive stem borers. The other Grand Ascension stage beings nearby also sprang into action upon seeing this. One of them made a hand seal, and fierce winds were instantly swept up, forming around a dozen massive tornadoes that surged forth with devastating might. Meanwhile, someone else pointed a finger forward, and the world's origin chi in the air was immediately churned up, following which countless thick bolts of lightning came crashing down with ferocious power. At the same time, the remaining Grand Ascension stage beings were all unleashing attacks of their own, and one of them even materialized a small translucent sword that was slashed directly through the air, unleashing countless translucent sword projections. Despite how powerful the giant stem borers were, there was no way they could withstand the attacks of so many Grand Ascension stage beings, and all of them were instantly eradicated, much to the elation of the devilish army. "Don't stop, keep advancing," the black-armored sacred ancestor ordered in a thunderous voice. All of the devilish troops immediately picked up the pace and continued onward. All of the stem borers that had parted earlier immediately converged again in waves of suicidal attacks, but were still unable to delay the group at all. Han Li was situated in the hall of the giant ark, but he was able to see everything using his spiritual sense. A faint smile appeared on his face as he witnessed all of the giant stem borers being easily eradicated by the Grand Ascension stage beings. The breaths of these giant insects were comparable in power to body integration stage attacks, but their defensive prowess was nowhere near the body integration stage. Otherwise, even with those Grand Ascension stage beings attacking in unison, they wouldn't have been able to eradicate so many body integration stage beings so easily. It seemed that these stem borers still weren't the most powerful ones in the swarm. At this moment, most of the Grand Ascension stage beings were gathered in the hall, with only several of them standing outside on the giant ark in case any unexpected incidents arose. Bao Hua was currently seated on a chair at the center of the hall, appraising the faux illusion sky mirror that she was holding in her hand. As for the other Grand Ascension stage beings, they were either gathered together in discussion or meditating in their chairs. Han Li cast his gaze towards sacred ancestor Zai Lion, who was sitting near a window, and discovered that she was appraising the battle raging outside through the window in a completely expressionless manner, making it impossible to tell what she was thinking. Not far away from her, Old Man Copper Crow and the Heavenly Crow Realm Grand Ascension stage beings were meditating on the ground with faint yellow light glowing from their bodies, seemingly practicing some kind of cultivation art. After a short while, Han Li also closed his eyes to meditate. Taoist Zai was standing beside him in a wooden manner, but Silvermoon was nowhere to be seen. Seeing as this could potentially be quite a dangerous trip, Han Li had left Silvermoon behind at the temporary cave abode he had created in the desert. Even though Silvermoon would be affected by the art of indifference after parting with him, it wouldn't be an issue as long as they weren't separated for too long. Chapter 22-27, Fierce Battle Against the Insect Swarms 2. Just as Han Li was getting absorbed in his own thoughts, Bao Hua suddenly raised an eyebrow and said, "They're here, everyone." She didn't mention exactly what they were, but all of the Grand Ascension stage beings immediately understood what she was referring to, and some of them, including Han Li, immediately cast their spiritual sense out of the giant ark. After a disturbance in the surrounding swarm of stem borers, a series of crimson stem borers appeared. These stem borers were only around a foot in size each, but there were faint golden spirit patterns all over their bodies, and 5 colored lights swirling within their green eyes. As soon as these stem borers appeared, the expressions of the Grand Ascension stage beings on the ark changed drastically, and they immediately withdrew their treasures. All of the nearby stem borers were instantly eradicated by the returning treasures, but the crimson stem borers suddenly vanished with a flap of their wings. In the next instant, all of the crimson stem borers appeared near the Grand Ascension stage beings before flying directly toward them. The Grand Ascension stage beings were naturally very alarmed, and they immediately attacked the stem borers or released their protective treasures. There was even one who let loose a loud cry as he reached out to grab one of the stem borers. However, all of their attacks and defensive measures were bypassed by these stem borers as if they didn't even exist. As soon as they reached the Grand Ascension stage beings, the stem borers began to give off scintillating crimson light. The Grand Ascension stage beings' expressions changed drastically upon seeing this, yet just as they were preparing to withstand the force of the imminent stem borer explosions with their bodies, Bao Hua's voice suddenly rang out in the air. "Rest assured, leave these things to me." As soon as her voice trailed off, a pillar of white light erupted out of the hall in the giant arc. The pillar of light then split up into several thin beams of light that struck the crimson stem borers, sending them flying for over 100 feet. A string of resounding booms rang out as several scorching crimson suns appeared, and a series of spatial rifts also emerged, as if the entire space were about to be torn apart. The power of these stem borer explosions was truly formidable. All of the Grand Ascension stage beings were stunned to see this. The explosions wouldn't have been enough to kill them, but severe injuries were definitely unavoidable. Right at this moment, a giant pink flower projection appeared up above amid a burst of spatial fluctuations, and Bao Hua emerged overhead. Before the Grand Ascension stage beings even had a chance to express their gratitude toward Bao Hua, around a dozen more crimson stem borers appeared. They immediately teleported over to Bao Hua, surrounding her in a watertight barrier, then prepared to self-detonate again, seemingly planning to kill her in one fell swoop. In response, Bao Hua merely chuckled coldly as countless silver stars suddenly erupted out of her body, forming a boundless galaxy that swept up all of the surrounding stem borers. A string of explosions rang out, but all of them were snuffed out by the galaxy of stars, unable to leave any impact at all. Letter 1D4BB, letter 1D633, letter 212F, letter 212F, letter 1D464, letter 212F, letter 1D4B7, letter 1D450, letter 2134, letter 1D4FA. All of the stars then converged to form a flag that was around 10 feet in length with shimmering silver stars etched all over its surface. It was none other than the Starfall flag. Around a dozen more Grand Ascension stage beings had flown out of the hall in the Ark in case their powers were required, and Han Li was one of them. He had his arms crossed and was appraising Bao Hua in an intrigued manner, planning to see how she was going to use those two treasures to deal with the stem borers. The failure of the Crimson Stem Borer's self-detonation had clearly enraged the entire swarm, and after a string of disturbances, close to 1,000 crimson balls of light emerged. Even Bao Hua's expression turned slightly grim at the sight of so many self-detonating stem borers, and she waved her flag through the air to create another galactic projection that encompassed the entire giant arc. At the same time, she pointed up at the small mirror overhead, and it immediately transformed into a full moon. Golden light surged through the moon, following which hundreds of beams of light shot forth at once, puncturing the bodies of the crimson stem borers with unerring accuracy. All of the crimson stem borers that were struck immediately exploded on the spot, sending scorching red flames surging in all directions and incinerating large hordes of surrounding stem borers into ashes. However, the remaining crimson stem borers all flapped their wings and instantly vanished on the spot. Bao Hua immediately retaliated, as the galaxy of stars suddenly began to surge violently at her behest. Countless stars changed positions as bursts of spatial fluctuations erupted forth, forcing all of the crimson stem borers to reveal themselves again. Furthermore, all of them had become extremely slow and sluggish, as if they were flying through treacle. A cold smile appeared on Bao Hua's face as she injected her immeasurable magic power into the full moon up above in a frenzy, and the moon immediately began releasing more beams of golden light. Each beam of light that was released resulted in the premature explosion of a crimson stem borer, but it also made the moon dim ever so slightly. The storm of golden light eradicated most of the crimson stem borers, but it also expended the last of the moon's power, and it reverted back into a small mirror that descended from above. Bao Hua rushed out of the galaxy of stars to catch the mirror, then cast her gaze toward the remaining crimson stem borers trapped in the galaxy of stars before making a certain hand seal. The galactic projection immediately surged back in reverse, and countless silver stars converged toward its center before exploding in unison, sweeping up gusts of fierce silver winds that created countless white spatial rifts. "This is a space-time storm," one of the Grand Ascension stage beings exclaimed upon seeing this, and a contemplative look also appeared on Han Li's face. In the next instant, all of the crimson stem borers swept up by the fierce silver winds were devoured by the white rifts and completely vanished. Bao Hua heaved a sigh of relief upon seeing this, then waved a hand down below. The silver winds immediately faded, and the silver flag re-emerged before flying back into Bao Hua's hand. After unleashing that astonishing ability, the Starfall flag had clearly been severely debilitated. After all, space-time storms simply weren't phenomena that the average profound heavenly treasure replica could create. So Bao Hua had to have unleashed this ability using a secret technique that harmed the Starfall flag. After stowing the two treasures away, Bao Hua said, "Rest assured, fellow Taoists, the self-detonating stem borers have been wiped out." After that, she slowly descended toward the giant ark. Han Li and the other Grand Ascension stage beings also returned to the ark shortly thereafter. Upon returning to the hall, Bao Hua sat down in a corner with her legs crossed. Meanwhile, all of the other Grand Ascension stage beings were discussing the powers that had just been displayed by the pair of treasures. As for Han Li, he merely returned to his seat and sat down with a faint smile. Without the impediment of the self-detonating stem borers and high-grade stem borers, the group was able to continue onward without a hitch. Close to half a day later, they finally emerged from the stem borer swarm and caught sight of the original sealed site in the distance. At this point, most of the elite devilish warriors had perished, and only just over 10,000 remained as the giant ark arrived at the original sealed site. Han Li and the Grand Ascension stage beings emerged from the giant ark and began to inspect their surroundings with curiosity in their eyes. The edge of this original sealed site was a barren mountain range, and littered between these mountains was the occasional building. However, the entire place was completely silent, and there was not a single person to be seen. Strangely enough, as soon as the stem borer swarm reached this area, they immediately drew to an abrupt halt outside the mountain range, as if there were something extremely fearsome in their eyes up ahead, and they didn't dare to continue any further, even as Han Li and the others continued onward. This is the power of the ancient seal. As expected, it really is able to suppress these stem borers. Let's keep everyone else here to keep an eye on the stem borer swarm while we head deeper into this place, Old Man Copper Crow suggested. Bao Hua nodded in agreement and said, "Fellow Taoist Que, Brother Feng, you too will stay here to repair some of the restrictions on the outskirts as we planned earlier. These restrictions are directly connected to the ancient seal, so if you can repair some of them, it'll greatly benefit the recovery of the ancient seal." Chapter 22-28, Underground Palace. A pair of sacred ancestors immediately gave affirmative responses, while the other Grand Ascension stage beings and their disciples continued deeper into the original sealed site. There was clearly an extremely powerful flight restriction in this area, as evidenced by the fact that even all of the Grand Ascension stage beings could only fly slowly onward at low altitudes. Of course, this was only relative to their normal speed. In the eyes of normal people, they were still extraordinarily fast. Around an hour later, the group had already covered a distance of close to 10,000 kilometers. All of a sudden, an extremely long canyon appeared up ahead, from within which clouds of thin purple mist were emerging before drifting up into the heavens. What was rather concerning was that there was a rank odor being released from the mist that struck one with a sense of dizziness, and also made one's spiritual sense very sluggish. All of the Grand Ascension stage beings swept their spiritual sense toward the purple mist, upon which all of their expressions changed slightly. Take care not to come into contact with too much of this stuff, fellow Taoists. This is a manifestation of the stem borer queen's aura, and this is what's transformed the devilish insects of our holy realm into stem borers, Bao Hua cautioned. All of the Grand Ascension stage beings' hearts jolted upon hearing this, and some immediately bolstered the protective spiritual light around them, while others even went as far as to summon a few protective treasures. However, the majority of the Grand Ascension stage beings seemed to be quite confident in their own powers and didn't display any reaction. Finally, everyone arrived in the air above the canyon, and they all drew a sharp breath at the sight that greeted them down below. The canyon was immeasurable deep, and gusts of bone-chilling winds were surging out of it alongside the purple mist. "Is this the place where the ancient seal is situated?" Han Li asked. Bao Hua smiled and replied, "The ancient seal is indeed located deep underground here. Back in ancient times, our holy race constructed a massive underground palace that encompasses the entire area with a radius of thousands of kilometers around this place. On top of that, a series of profound restrictions were set up, and the stem borer queen is situated right at the center of the underground palace. Due to the fact that a part of the ancient seal's power is now under the stem borer queen's control, we had been unable to enter the underground palace. However, this just so happens to be a period of time that comes around cyclically where there's a massive eruption of the world's origin chi. As a result, the power of the ancient seal is quite unstable, and we'll be able to enter the underground palace. Otherwise, we'd still be able to force our way into the underground palace, but that would definitely awaken the Stembora Queen. Is the Stembora Queen really that alert and receptive? According to my knowledge, it's very difficult for the vast majority of insects to awaken from hibernation for recovery purposes. The only exception would be if someone approached them and tried to take their lives. An elderly man in a set of Taoist robes said with furrowed brows. Baohua cast her gaze toward the elderly man and replied, "You may be renowned for your understanding of insects, but don't forget that Stembora Queen is no ordinary insect, so there are some conventions that simply don't apply to it, fellow Taoist Gu." "HMPH, I'll take your word for it then," the elderly man harumphed coldly, seemingly unconvinced by Baohua's words. Baohua didn't seem to be very fond of him either, and her expression immediately darkened as she replied, "If you don't believe me, you can go on ahead and see for yourself." She then cast her gaze deep into the canyon, seemingly waiting for something. The elderly man's expression changed slightly upon hearing this, and a hint of fury flashed through his eyes, but he remained silent in the end. And of course, he certainly wasn't going to recklessly venture into the canyon on his own. And Li couldn't help but cast an intrigued gaze toward this elderly man. He clearly knew that Baohua was no ordinary Grand Ascension stage being, yet he still dared to speak to her in such a rude manner. It was clear that he was no slouch either. All of a sudden, Baohua transmitted her voice to Han Li. "Fellow Taoist Han, this Taoist Gong has a very abrasive personality, and he specializes in poison abilities that pose a huge headache even to me. I'd advise you not to get involved with him." Han Li merely nodded in response, but remained silent. Perhaps it was due to the purple mist or the power of the ancient seal, but as soon as one's spiritual sense descended more than 1,000 feet into the canyon, it would involuntarily scatter, making it impossible to glean the contents of the canyon. As such, everyone could only look on with wary expressions. Right at this moment, Baohua suddenly produced a shimmering silver formation plate, which she cast a string of incantation seals onto. The silver formation plate began to fluctuate in brightness as if it had suddenly attained sentience, and after a short while, bright silver light radiated from the formation plate alongside countless silver runes. "This is it. It's time to go in, fellow Taoists," Baohua said with an elated expression as she flew toward the canyon as a ball of pink light while holding the silver plate in her hand. The other Grand Ascension stage beings immediately followed along. Golden light emanated from Han Li's body, easily keeping the purple mist at bay, and he also descended along with everyone else. To their surprise, the canyon wasn't as immeasurably deep as it had appeared on the surface. After flying for only around 10,000 feet, a patch of gentle white light suddenly appeared up ahead. Everyone quickly landed on the solid ground down below, and Han Li looked around to discover that they were all situated on a massive plaza that was over 100 acres in size and paved with translucent white jade. Letter 1D65B, letter 1D493, letter 1D486, letter 1D65A, letter 1D498, letter 1D486, letter 1D484, letter 1D490, letter 1D4F6. There were fist-sized jewels embedded onto the ground at regular intervals, illuminating this area and making it as bright as day. There were 8 winding paths around the plaza leading in different directions, and Han Li looked up as the purple mist slowly converged from all directions before rising upward. All right, the fact that we've managed to arrive safely indicates that the Stembora Queen is still in its slumber. Now then, let's proceed according to the original plan. I'll lead a group of people to contact the spirit of the ancient seal, while fellow Taoist Copper Crow and our fellow Taoists from the Heavenly Crow realm will venture deep into the underground palace to try and get into contact with our trapped allies. Our 2 fellow Taoists from the Black Knight realm will go to the deepest part of the underground palace to find where the Stembora Queen is hibernating and conduct surveillance on it, but make sure not to alert it. With the concealment secret techniques of the Black Knight realm, I'm sure this won't be a difficult task. As for everyone else, split up and travel to the formation cores of the underground palace to repair some of the key restrictions there. Those places may be guarded by the descendants of the Stembora Queen, so be careful. The true descendants of the Stembora Queen are far more powerful than the Stemboras outside, and they're extremely dangerous even for Grand Ascension stage beings like us, Baohua instructed. He will look after ourselves. I'll be going on ahead then. You be careful too, fellow Taoist Baohua. Thus, all of the Grand Ascension stage beings split up into groups and departed from the plaza. Han Li and Taoist Zai were split into a group with two other Grand Ascension stage beings, and the four of them disappeared down one of the paths leading away from the plaza. These other two Grand Ascension stage beings were Zai Lion, and the foreign Grand Ascension stage being enshrouded in green chi, Lu Shi. Their mission was to repair some of the restrictions at the formation core of the underground palace. Zai Lion was walking on ahead while inspecting a jade slip in her hand, and Han Li and Taoist Zai were in the middle, while Lu Shi brought up the rear. None of them said anything, and they gently glided along several feet above the ground. Their spiritual sense was able to encompass the entire area within a radius of over 1,000 feet, and as long as there wasn't anyone far more powerful than them here, no one would be able to escape their detection. Han Li was inspecting his surroundings with a calm expression, and he discovered that the path that they were traversing was lined with tall rectangular pagodas. These pagodas were quite antiquated in design, and their surfaces were riddled with simplistic ancient runes, seemingly having already stood for countless years. After flying along for around 15 minutes, they still hadn't reached the end of the path. All of a sudden, Han Li's brows furrowed slightly, and he drew to an abrupt halt. "Did you discover something, fellow Taoist Han?" Zai Lion asked as she turned around. Lu Shi also stopped in his tracks to hear what Han Li had to say. "There seems to be something interesting over there. Would you two like to take a look?" Han Li said with a smile as he cast his gaze toward a certain direction. Zai Lion swept her spiritual sense toward the same direction, but was unable to discover anything, and her expression changed slightly as she said, "Your spiritual sense can detect things that far away." Lu Shi was also unable to detect anything with his spiritual sense, and he said, "I'd be happy to accompany you, fellow Taoist Han." It was clear that Han Li's spiritual sense was far more powerful than his and Zai Lion's. Han Li nodded before drifting toward the same direction that he had cast his gaze toward, followed by an expressionless Taoist Zai. Zai Lion and Lu Shi exchanged a cautious glance, and only then did they follow along. Chapter 22-29, Human-Faced Insect. After straying only several hundred feet off the path, both Zai Lion and Lu Shi immediately detected something. After flying for no more than 2,000 feet, a massive deep crater that was around 80 feet in size emerged up ahead. There were 7 stone pagodas around the giant crater that were in ruins, and the ground was riddled with countless deep trenches, indicating that a fierce battle had taken place here. At the center of the giant crater lay the charred black remains of a giant insect, and it seemed that this was only less than half of the insect's entire carcass. Even though the carcass was incomplete, it was still quite menacing to behold, and both Zai Lion and Lu Shi couldn't help but draw a sharp breath. This insect was similar in appearance to the average stem borer with a glossy exoskeleton, but on its long and thin neck was an extremely hideous male head, complete with all of its facial features and a head of disheveled green hair that resembled wild grass. The carcass was lying still on the ground without any blood around it, having clearly perished here a long time ago. "So this is a true descendant of the stem borer queen. It really is very disturbing to look at," Zai Lion said as her face paled slightly. "It truly is. I didn't think that these insects would be so unsightly. The stem borer queen is most likely even more disgusting to look at. What do you think, fellow Taoist Han?" Lu Shi asked. "Letter 1D4 BB, letter 1D633, letter 1D626, letter 1D626, letter 1D638, letter 212F, letter 1D624, letter 1D45C, letter 1D62E. "Perhaps so. I won't just come to any conclusions before I see the stem borer queen for myself," Han Li said with a faint smile, then suddenly swept a sleeve toward the giant crater. A loud boom rang out as a burst of invisible power struck the insect carcass, causing it to flip onto its back. Zai Lion's complexion paled even further at the sight of the insect's underside. The insect had around a dozen shattered limbs attached to its abdomen, some of which were very sharp and lined with hard black fur, just like the limbs of actual insects. However, the other limbs were fair and delicate, bearing a strong appearance to human hands, but instead of 5 fingers, each hand was comprised of 3 fingers, one of which was quite thin, while the other 2 were thicker. Lu Shi's eyelids spasmed upon seeing this, and he raised a hand to conjure up a blue fireball, which he immediately sent flying toward the insect carcass. The fireball didn't seem to be releasing any heat, but the air around it had become quite warped and blurry, clearly indicating that the flames were extremely fearsome. As soon as the fireball struck the insect carcass, the latter immediately burst into flames. Moments later, Lu Shi made a hand seal before pointing a finger at the carcass, and a dull thump rang out as the blue flames instantly vanished to reveal the carcass again. However, aside from the fact that it was slightly more charred black than before, the carcass appeared to have been largely unaffected. Lu Shi and Zai Lion's expression darkened even further upon seeing this. Interesting. Let me give it a try as well, Han Li chuckled as he raised a hand to flick 3 of his fingers through the air. 3 streaks of azure sword chi instantly erupted from his fingertips before striking the carcass in quick succession. 3 dull thumps rang out one after another, and the 3 streaks of sword chi achieved completely different outcomes. The first streak of sword chi was instantly repelled, the second streak managed to slice through a part of the carcass's exoskeleton, and the third streak was able to slice the carcass cleanly in half. A hint of surprise appeared in the eyes of both Lu Shi and Zai Lion upon seeing this, while Han Li began to stroke his own chin with a contemplative expression. Zai Lion asked, "Were those 3 streaks of sword chi you unleashed just now of different levels of power, Brother Han?" "That's right. The first streak contained around half of my full power, the second streak was a full power strike, while the third streak was infused with a flying sword that's a bonded treasure of mine," Han Li replied. Zai Lion and Lu Shi were naturally unaware that Han Li had lied about the first 2 streaks of sword chi, and only told the truth for the third one. His powers were far superior to those of an ordinary Grand Ascension stage being, so the first streak of sword chi had only contained around 20% of his full power, while the second one was only imbued with around 50% of his full power. Even so, Zai Lion and Lu Shi were quite stunned by how resolute this carcass was. Not only is this insect virtually immune to fellow Taoist Lu Shi's true flames, it can even withstand fellow Taoist hand sword chi to a certain extent. Looks like these descendants of the Stembora Queen are even more fearsome than I'd imagined. What should we do if we encounter one of them? Zai Lion asked with a grim expression. There's no need to fear. If we really do encounter one of these insects, we'll just have to attack it as normal. I'm confident that the 4 of us combined will be able to bring down a mere insect. Lu Shi chuckled coldly in response. 1 or 2 of them won't be an issue, but what if we encounter 7 or 8 or even more of these insects? Would you still be so confident then? Zai Lion sighed. Lu Shi's confident facade slipped a little upon hearing this. Surely there are that many of these things around. It's indeed very unlikely to encounter so many of these insects. If the Stembora Queen had the ability to produce so many descendants, it would have most likely broken out of this ancient seal long ago, Han Li said with a shake of his head. I certainly hope so. Otherwise, we could potentially find ourselves in some huge trouble. It looks like the last group of fellow Taoists to have entered this underground palace were the ones who killed this insect. I wonder why they left in such a hurry. I hope there aren't more of these things up ahead, Zai Lion said with a wry smile. In any case, we're already here, so we can't back down now. We've already wasted quite a bit of time here. Let's keep going. It would be truly regrettable if our tardiness affects fellow Taoist Bao Hua's plans, Han Li said in a calm manner, then drifted back the way he had come. Through his examination, he had determined that these insects didn't pose much of a threat to him, so he naturally wasn't going to be too concerned. Taoist Zai followed along behind him in silence, and Zai Lion and Lu Shi were rather surprised by Han Li's decisive departure. However, they knew that Han Li was right, so they could trail along behind him as well. Taoist Zai seemed to be completely obedient to Han Li, and Han Li had just displayed spiritual sense far superior to that of Zai Lion and Lu Shi, so the 2 of them were unconsciously beginning to follow Han Li's lead. Shortly thereafter, the 4 of them returned to the path and continued onward according to the map. As they progressed along the path, they didn't encounter any obstacles, and that came as quite a relief for both Zai Lion and Lu Shi. Even though they were both at the Grand Ascension stage, they definitely didn't want to encounter an insect like the one they had just seen. At this moment, the 4 of them had arrived in a spacious garden with shimmering silver trees all around them. These trees had palm-sized silver flowers growing on their branches that were very beautiful to look at, but didn't give off any aroma. Initially, Lu Shi had been rather wary of these trees, but his concerns were assuaged after Zai Lion informed him that this was a plant unique to the Elder Devil realm, and it served no purpose other than as a low-grade pill refinement ingredient. Brother Han, according to the map, that hall up ahead should be where the formation core is situated. Once we repair it, our mission will be complete, Zai Lion said as the 3 of them emerged from the garden, upon which a gray hall appeared in the distance. "Looks like our journey was quite smooth. I wonder if the same applied for our other fellow Taoists," Han Li replied with a nod. For some reason, as soon as he had arrived in the garden, he couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that he was being watched. Considering how powerful his spiritual sense was, it was virtually impossible for him to be unable to detect someone if they were nearby. This meant that the one watching them either possessed incredible powers and could avoid the detection of his spiritual sense, or this was merely a figment of his imagination brought on by the powers of the ancient seal and all of the restrictions in the underground palace. In any case, Han Li had naturally become a lot more cautious, but as soon as they emerged from the garden, this strange feeling suddenly vanished, leaving him feeling quite perplexed. Meanwhile, an indistinct humanoid figure situated in a dark underground cave in the deepest part of the underground palace suddenly began to cackle to himself. "I can't believe someone from a lower realm has managed to cultivate the spirit refinement technique to the second stage. Haha, the heavens really are smiling down upon me. Looks like I won't be trapped here for much longer." Initially, the cackling was very loud, but it gradually became clearer and more deranged, striking the listener with a bone-chilling sensation.